Chapter 101. Madness. Snape cast the iron armor curse to block the long sword with blue flames, and used another magic spell to knock Qin Yu away, who was attacking without defense. The latter fell from mid-air and fell hard to the ground. Come again. Qin Yu stood up with his sword in hand, wiped the corners of his mouth and said, "By the way, at night, Qin Yu and Professor Snape came to the room of requirement again for a practical confrontation that had been interrupted for 2 months. Qin Yu proposed that he wanted to use that sword. After all, he was not as strong as Professor Snape and wanted to try another weapon. Snape agreed, and then Qin Yu violently attacked him. Even though Professor Snape was proficient in using magic, he was still a little embarrassed by Qin Yu's fighting method learned from the basilisk. After all, this kid relied on Snape not to be ruthless, so the fight was really disorganized. In addition to attacking, basically giving up defense. You don't have peace of mind. What's the point of training like this? Professor Snape said coldly. If the lily in your heart is bullied, will your heart be peaceful? Qin Yu held swords in both hands and said quietly to Snape. When Snape heard this, a cold light flashed in his eyes and he clenched his fists. Be serious, Professor, Qin Yu challenged. Okay. Snape suddenly raised his wand in front of him, waved it down vigorously, and saluted solemnly. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes and became highly alert. As long as he didn't eat big melons, he felt that he still had hope of living. Note: Avada Kedavra is pronounced like Avada chewing a big melon, which is a Conger translation. Half an hour later, Qin Yu leaned on Professor Snape's back, covered in wounds. Professor Snape's clothes were also damaged in many places, and there was even a cut on his face. The two of them just sat back to back on the ground, panting, and didn't speak for a long time. Harry will hate you. After a while, Qin Yu weakly broke the silence first. Did Hagrid tell you about me? Snape did not respond, but asked abruptly. Not entirely. You also know that I have many options. Qin Yu didn't want to explain too much. I heard from Hagrid that he was the child you went to pick up with him? Snape continued to ask. Well, picking him up on a rocky island is an exaggeration, right? The Dursleys are not too good or bad to him, but, children, if they grow up in a bad environment, it's easy to live a very depressed life, Qin Yu said pointedly. It seems that you know a lot about me. Snape obviously understood the meaning of Qin Yu's words. After all, his own childhood was not very good. It could even be said to be very bad. Fortunately, near Spider Inn Alley where he lived, he met a girl named Lily Evans. She had long dark red hair and beautiful bright green eyes. Most importantly, she was for such a kind person. The days when he became friends with her were the happiest times in his life. It's a pity that he ruined everything and even lost her forever. Isn't it normal to care about your past? I really treat you as my brother, Qin Yu said seriously. Don't try to provoke me again. I don't want to help you heal your injuries again. Snape's tone was filled with seriousness. Ahem, then you should be nicer to Hermione in the future. Qin Yu changed the subject. Sure enough. He is really a person who likes to complain, Snape said quietly. No, she didn't say anything. But don't I know what your temper is? Qin Yu said angrily. Have you rested enough? Come again. Well, Professor, I think that's all for today. But I feel that you still have a lot of spare energy. Snape stood up and said loudly to Qin Yu, pick up that flashy sword of yours. It doesn't have to be so fast. At least 5 more minutes of rest. Just 5 minutes. Okay. I'm up. Wait, you're risking a green light. What kind of curse is this? We won't kill you. Fortunately, the green light is only yellow-green, not the green color of eating a big melon. Later, late at night, the principal's office. Dumbledore invited Snape to sit down and drink tea, and looked at the latter's torn robes and 2 wounds on his face with interest. Do you need me to help you deal with it? Old Dang made a gesture and said to Snape with a smile in his eyes. Thank you, Professor Dumbledore. However, I can solve it myself, so I won't bother you, Snape said solemnly. So, Severus, do you think the child can control himself now? Dumbledore returned to the topic and said solemnly. I can't guarantee whether he can completely control himself, but I did hit hard today, and he didn't use that power, Snape said matter-of-factly. Oh, it seems that he has made great progress. Dumbledore nodded. Yes, he is indeed very talented in magic. The most important thing is that he has an imagination far beyond ordinary people. That's right. Magic requires imagination most. Ha ha ha. It seems that you admire him very much, Severus. I'm just observing and evaluating him as you say. Yes, I understand. Then, wait and see. I will find a chance to talk to the child. The conversation didn't last long. After talking about this, Snape drank all the tea in his cup, stood up, bowed slightly, and left the principal's office. As the principal, Professor Dumbledore was sitting behind his desk thinking about something. Voldemort, Grindelwald's army, Qin, Harry, the power that the Sorting Hat fears. Okay, we can cause more trouble. As he murmured these words, Dumbledore suddenly took out the ancient wand and waved it gently at Fawkes, the phoenix. Immediately afterwards, a long feather fell off from Fawkes's tail, and just after the feather left Phoenix's body, it suddenly burned in the air. Fawkes raised his eyelids and let out a low groan of dissatisfaction. Don't be angry, old man. We need your help, Dumbledore reassured. Phoenix hummed again, closed its eyes again, and continued to sleep. Thanks to Professor Snape's treatment, although Qin Yu was disgraced, there were no serious injuries on his body. When he returned to the Gryffindor dormitory area, he saw Hermione sitting on a chair reading a book in the common lounge area. It was late at night, and Hermione was the only one in the entire public rest area. Obviously, she was waiting for someone to come back. When the little girl saw the injuries on Qin Yu's face, she naturally frowned with a worried look on her face. Actually, it's not too serious. Let's blow it on for me, and I'll be fine in no time. Qin Yu leaned his face over. Hermione puffed up her little face and blew a few times. Qin Yu nodded with satisfaction and said, Well, the effect is good. I have a more effective method. Hermione looked at him and said softly. Before Qin Yu could ask what the method was, he felt his cheek being lightly pecked. Good night, Qin. The little girl who succeeded in the sneak attack ran away immediately and disappeared after leaving these words. Looking at the direction in which she disappeared, Qin Yu touched his cheek and thought to himself, was this girl admired by her classmates because of her performance today? And then, what hidden attributes did she inspire? Isn't this too strong? However, Qin Yu felt that he could still bear it. Thinking about all this, he also left the common rest area and returned to the Gryffindor boys' dormitory. Chapter 102. It is Gryffindor's turn to use the Quidditch pitch on Saturday morning, and the Gryffindor Quidditch team will conduct its first official training since the start of the school year. Hermione was very excited about this. She waited in the common rest area early in the morning, and then forced herself not to look at the chair where the two of them sat last night, nor to think about her actions last night. The more embarrassed you are, the more embarrassed you are. The less embarrassed you are, the less embarrassed you are. As long as you are not embarrassed, you are not embarrassed. The little girl silently recited the formula Qin once taught her. Although this formula is a bit convoluted, I have to say that it is indeed useful. Even when Qin poked her cheek when no one was paying attention, she could calmly pretend not to understand what he meant. Such an obvious hint. Hermione, you have changed? Qin's voice sounded slowly in her ears. I didn't. Hermione blurted out yesterday. Oh, so you still remember what happened yesterday? Qin's voice sounded again. No, I don't remember. I didn't do anything yesterday, Hermione said decisively. Sure enough, he has become a cheater. Before Qin's voice fell, Hermione felt her hand being held tightly by another hand, and then her body was involuntarily pulled to another secluded corridor. She knew that Qin knew the terrain of the school very well. Qin, what are you going to do? I know I'm wrong, Hermione said quickly when seeing no one around. Oh, what's wrong? Qin Yu asked. Let me think about it. It seems that you need me to help you recall. No, I remembered. Qin Yu chose that secluded corridor, of course, because it was a shortcut to the auditorium. After all, they had to rush to have breakfast. Then, it is reasonable and logical to punish a little girl who becomes bolder when no one is around. For family status, you have to start from small things and accumulate bit by bit. Of course, he just did what she did to him last night, and there was no excessive behavior. Well, Qin Yu's policy towards classmate Hermione has always been small punishments but big warnings, cure illnesses, and save lives. At this time, Hermione, who was sitting next to the dining table, her face flushed, took a small bite of bread, and then looked at Qin Yu with her lips pursed. She recalled what happened just now. Someone said that she had obsessive-compulsive disorder and insisted on receiving the same treatment on both sides of her face. She obviously liked to cheat, but she also said that I cheated. Okay, don't think about it anymore. Hurry up and have breakfast. Hermione shook her head, trying to forget what had just happened so she could calm down as soon as possible. Otherwise, your cheeks will always be a little warm. Well, This tastes good, try it. A piece of meat roll was handed over by Qin Yu. The girl naturally opened her mouth to bite it and took it into her mouth. As the food was chewed between her lips and teeth, her taste buds were fully awakened, and her eyes gradually lit up. Well, it tastes really good. Then, the girl looked expectantly at the food on Qin Yu's plate, waiting to be fed the second piece. Can I fly for a while? I haven't experienced the feeling of riding a broomstick yet. Hermione pulled on the sleeves of Qin Yu's robe and begged with watery eyes. Hermione hasn't had any flying lessons since the start of school, and it's said that their first flying lesson won't be until next week. Not yet, you just ate too much. Qin Yu patted the girl's head and said, It's all your fault that you had to feed me so much. Hermione was very skilled at raking down the food. Didn't you say that when we were at the dinner table? Qin Yu gently pinched the cheek of a girl who was blaming her. Then, he got on his broomstick and suddenly took off, bringing with him a gust of wind and grass clippings. Hermione looked at the figure flying in the sky, her eyes full of excitement, and the corners of her mouth gradually turned upward. She finally saw him flying in the sky with her own eyes, not just through the moving magic photo. Thinking about the past year, waiting for the letter from Hogwarts at home, it seemed like a long, long time ago. At that time, I would go to the attic where he lived almost every day and would lie on the small bed where he lay, imagining what he was doing at that time, and whether he would also remember that time. Carve yourself. In a daze, she felt as if time had suddenly been pulled from the past to the present, pulling herself from the small attic to the wide court of this magic school, so that she could see him on the court as soon as she raised her head. Flying and chasing figures. So, will time suddenly pull me to a long, long time in the future, when both I and him have become adults, and will he be by my side at that time? Thinking of this, Hermione felt sad for no reason. It was the panic and helplessness facing the passage of time. For the first time in her life, this girl with brown hair began to think about the meaning of time, and worried about gains and losses because she didn't know how to face the fleeting and changing time. Someone was shouting her name in the sky. The girl looked up and saw a figure flying from far to near. Before she could respond, a strong arm picked her up. Then, she was firmly held in a familiar embrace and sat firmly on the side of a broomstick. Front end. Are you ready? The voice whispered in her ear. Yeah. She nodded nervously and expectantly. Then, she was carried high into the sky. Feeling the strong wind blowing across her cheeks, Hermione struggled to open her eyes, trying to overlook the earth below. However, after she opened her eyes, she immediately closed them again, because she wanted to feel the feeling of being held in his arms and flying. Is this like people rushing by in the long river of time? Then, with his company, everything is so peaceful. Even if the wind in the sky is so cold, his embrace is warm enough. Qin, will we be together forever? I think it will. The girl who asks and answers questions accumulates the courage to face time in her heart. The Gryffindor Quidditch team's first training session after the start of the school year went fairly smoothly, except everyone was fed a full belly of dog food. Captain Wood, is it a violation for two people to ride a broomstick, right? Fred said angrily. Yes, can this be allowed? George also asked. Upon hearing this, Oliver Wood, the new captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, shrugged and said helplessly, Of course it is a violation during the game, but obviously it is not game time. Isn't there anyone who cares about it? This is a serious disruption to the normal training order. The Weasley twins continued to speak righteously. Obviously, Qin has completed the training tasks outstandingly. If he wants to take his daughter, well, sister, to practice flying on the court, there is nothing wrong with that. Senior Wood said with a sigh. The twins were speechless. It seemed that it was Qin who made them speechless last time. Forget it. Out of sight, out of mind. George and Fred looked at each other for another minute, then walked away sourly, shaking their heads as if they had eaten lemons. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites shared the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 103. After taking Hermione to experience flying for a while, Qin Yu gently put her down. Are you happy now? Qin Yu said this and helped Hermione straighten her messy hair. When he was training just now, he saw this girl kicking the grass with her head down, looking bored and unhappy. Thinking about what she said before, Qin Yu took advantage of the break in training to fly down and fly several times in the sky with Hermione in his arms. Actually, I'm not unhappy. I just thought of something. Hermione pursed her lips and said, Huh, what is it? Does it have anything to do with me? Qin Yu raised his eyebrows and said in a slightly teasing tone, "Yes, yes." Hermione looked at him and nodded very seriously. "So, have you figured it out?" Qin Yu asked curiously. I didn't really understand it, but I already have a direction." Hermione tilted her head and thought about it, and finally said firmly, "That's good." Qin Yu nodded and didn't ask too much. After all, if Hermione wanted to tell him, she would definitely tell him. Then, he frowned and said dissatisfiedly to the girl, "Dear Miss Granger, I have been practicing for so long. Don't you want to say something?" Hearing this, Hermione smiled, put her hands behind her back, and hooked her fingers together. Then, she bit her lip, stood on tiptoes, and whispered into Qin Yu's ear. "Very handsome great-great." Although the voice was small, it penetrated into Qin Yu's ears accurately, making him feel half of his scalp numb and his heart trembling slightly. Well, it must be because the sound is too close, and the vibration of the sound triggers the bone sound transmission mechanism, causing this strange feeling. Qin Yu explained this in his heart. Seeing Qin Yu's serious and indifferent expression, classmate Hermione felt a little stunned for no reason. She looked around and found that no one was paying attention, so she quickly pecked someone on the cheek, just like last night. However, this time she didn't run away immediately. Instead, he raised his chin and looked at the stern look cast by Qin, unwilling to be outdone. At worst, he would be taken to a secluded corridor again. At worst, he would be punished, or his obsessive-compulsive needs would be satisfied. Hermione classmate thought so openly in her heart. Finally, after Qin Yu showed a helpless smile, Hermione won the final victory in this confrontation with him. "Be good. After I finish training, let's go to the wooden house for a picnic." Qin Yu patted the girl's head and said, "Yeah." Hermione nodded repeatedly. The wooden house is naturally Hagrid's wooden house. It's been a week since school started. Taking advantage of the weekend, Qin Yu made an appointment with Hagrid and the others to go there for a picnic and have a little get-together. Of course, Hermione was looking forward to this. Seeing Qin Yu re-engage in training, chasing red quaffles and black bludgers in the air, Hermione's eyes were full of smiles and some kind of indescribable emotion. Then, she subconsciously pursed her lips and tasted a slightly salty taste on her lips, probably because she had just touched the sweat on his cheeks. Thinking of this, instead of feeling disgusted or disgusted, she actually liked this special, slightly salty taste. Isn't it a little strange that I have such a preference?" Hermione tasted the faded lips again, her face feeling slightly warm, and she thought to herself, "Well, this matter can be verified and studied in the future. For now, it is better to concentrate on watching Qin's training." The girl pushed those thoughts away from her mind and concentrated on watching Qin Yu's training, cheering and cheering from time to time. Well, to save him, he said that he didn't cheer for him. Not long after the Gryffindor Quidditch team started training again, several first-year students came over after hearing the news. "Ron, why didn't you tell me earlier that Qin and the others were training today?" Harry said breathlessly. "When I went to find George and Fred, I heard what their classmates said. If I had known that they were training so early today, I would have been the first one here," Ron also said with some annoyance. Relatively speaking, Ron likes Quidditch more than Harry, at least so far. Harry's motivation was more to see how powerful Qin was, and to learn about Quidditch, a wizarding sport. Who are those people? Ron saw 3 familiar figures from a distance and had a bad feeling in his heart. It's Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Harry recognized the identities of the 3 people at a glance. After all, he really hated the blonde-haired boy. This is probably because Draco Malfoy was the first wizard of his own age that he hated, so he left such a deep impression on him. Just like Qin is the first wizard of his own age that he likes, and he is also a very special existence. It's really disappointing. Ron also didn't have a good impression of Malfoy. Harry and Ron had a brief discussion and decided to ignore these 3 Slytherin guys. "Harry Potter? You came to the stadium too. You've probably never even touched a broomstick, right?" Malfoy's annoying, arrogant voice came from a long way away. "I don't need to explain my affairs to you." Harry stopped and choked. He felt that he could just treat this annoying blonde wizard like Dudley, that stupid pig. After all, the way and the tone of their speech were exactly the same. Be careful of getting hit by the bludger later." Malfoy was just as angry as Dudley, and then, as if he had discovered something ridiculous, he continued to mock, "Haha, you probably don't even know what you don't even know about the bludgers, right? This is our Gryffindor training. What are you doing here?" Ron boldly asked Malfoy. These words made the 3 Malfoys blush immediately. "This is the school stadium. We can come if we want. Besides, I want to see if that guy Qin is as powerful as the rumors say. Don't be bragging. Malfoy finally found a reasonable excuse. Then just open your eyes and take a good look. Harry left these words and went in another direction with Ron. Anyway, the stadium is very big. Since we are tired of looking at each other, it is better to stay away from each other. If we are out of sight, we will be out of mind. After waiting some distance away from Malfoy and the others, Harry was sure that they couldn't hear his voice, so he leaned close to his companion's ear and asked in a low voice, Ron, what is a bludger? Harry, are you serious? Ron said in surprise. Dimensional wall. I have no intention of not writing. Please don't give up on me. It's just that I've been delayed because of a lot of things lately. Then, there is another chapter in the afternoon or evening. Chapter 104. Harry, are you serious? Ron was really surprised when Harry asked what a bludger was, thinking he was probably joking. After all, how could anyone not know what a bludger is? To be honest, I don't even know how many people attended the Quidditch match. Harry shrugged and said calmly. In front of Malfoy, Harry didn't want to reveal his ignorance of Quidditch knowledge, but with Ron, he had no such worries at all and just said what he had to say. Seeing the serious look on his companion's face, Ron finally realized that Harry probably wasn't lying, so he cleared his throat and said, Then, let me tell you the rules of Quidditch. There are 3 kinds of balls in Quidditch, namely the quaffle, the bludger, and the golden snitch. So many. Harry didn't expect that in ball games in the wizarding world, there were even more balls than in the muggle world. Isn't this normal? A group of people can't just compete for one ball, Harry? Haha. Ron thought Harry's question was a bit strange. In the muggle world, there is really only one ball, whether it's football, basketball, or table tennis, Harry said with a shrug. That's really hard to understand, Ron said with some surprise. Well, this is the difference in concepts between 2 children who grew up in different worlds. Just like Harry couldn't imagine how to play with 3 kinds of balls on the field, Ron couldn't imagine how a group of people would fight for a ball that couldn't even fly. If you can't fly and can only run around on the ground, what's there to watch? Of course, as their knowledge and horizons broaden, they will surely have a deeper understanding of the differences between the 2 worlds. Just like today, Ron was talking about a lot of Quidditch knowledge while gesticulating on his hands and knees, and Harry finally had a certain idea of this magical sport. Harry and Ron were talking as they approached the court, and then they saw a girl yelling. If not the eldest sister, Hermione Granger, who else could it be? In other words, since Friday's potions class, the first years have automatically promoted Hermione's status. A girl who likes to answer questions and show off in class may be considered a bit annoying, but a person who dares to contradict the teacher in class will be regarded as a real warrior. And with Qin behind her, Harry naturally respects her, not to mention Ron. Both of his older brothers are Qin's little brothers, and his school supplies were indirectly obtained because of Qin. In short, this layer of relationship made Harry and Ron quite respectful of Sister He. Harry? Ron? You're here too. Hermione also saw the 2 approaching and greeted her warmly. Then, she asked doubtfully, Where's Adam? Aren't you 3 together all day long? Adam is still sleeping. He never seems to get enough sleep. Harry and Ron replied one after another. I guess he hasn't adjusted from the holiday routine yet. Hermione made a bold guess based on her own experience. If Qin hadn't asked her to adjust her schedule before school started, she probably wouldn't have been able to get out of bed in the morning. In this way, the 3 of them gathered together, watching the training of the Gryffindor Quidditch team and cheering for the people on the field. And soon, they noticed 3 people dozens of meters away from them cheering from time to time. It was the Malfoy trio. Malfoy actually didn't want to shout, but when he saw the lightning-fast batsman in the air casually hitting those difficult moves, he really couldn't control his excitement. Quidditch, that is the dream of many boys in the wizarding world. At this moment, Malfoy finally knew how powerful Qin really was. Of course, he soon noticed the gazes of Harry Potter and others, so he forced himself not to show it so obviously. And when Qin Yu hit a V-shaped double combo with the cooperation of another red-haired batter, Malfoy shouted again. A V-shaped double hit, also known as a valley double hit, is when the first batter hits the bludger downward, and the second batter below hits the bludger again, hit upward, thus forming a surprisingly winning V-shaped turning attack route. This is basically only seen in larger professional leagues. Malfoy only saw his father a limited number of times. It would be great if Qin was a senior in Slytherin. I would definitely go to him to ask for Quidditch tips. Draco Malfoy murmured. Draco, what were you talking about just now? Goyle asked blankly. It's nothing. Gryffindor is really lucky to have Qin here, Malfoy said quietly. Yes, such an excellent Quidditch batter should come to Slytherin, Crabbe said with a look of regret. Thank you for your hard work. That's it for today. The next training time is scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. After the training, Captain Oliver would said to the players in the sky. Then, they dispersed on the spot. Everyone held down the broom handle, lowered their bodies, and flew in different directions. Qin Yu, George, and Fred flew to where Hermione, Harry, and Ron were. Qin, you are great. Qin, you are the most powerful hitter I have ever seen. Harry and Ron leaned forward excitedly. This made George and Fred very dissatisfied. After all, their younger brothers seemed to have forgotten that their two brothers were also batsmen, and they ignored them. Hermione looked helplessly as Qin was surrounded by two fans asking questions. She felt like she couldn't squeeze through for a while. And while several people were chatting lively, three young uninvited guests came, Draco Malfoy and his two followers. When Master Malfoy came up, he said seriously that Qin was wasting his talents in Gryffindor. If he were Qin, he would rather drop out of school. That's why you rarely stay in Slytherin, Harry said angrily. He was now very glad that he did not choose to go to Slytherin. If he had gone to that house, stayed with Malfoy all day, or even slept in the same dormitory, he couldn't imagine whether he would go crazy. I'm not talking to you. Besides, Harry Potter, do you think anyone can enter Slytherin? Someone like you who is similar to a mudblood can't even step into Slytherin. Go. Malfoy felt that he hated Harry extremely now. Note: mudblood refers to wizards of non-pure blood origin who are muggles. It is a very contemptuous term. This guy is always against him, Malfoy said angrily in his heart. Oh, even if the Sorting Hat asked me to go, I wouldn't go there. Malfoy's words made Harry want to laugh a little, because the Sorting Hat had indeed asked him to enter Slytherin before. Of course, Harry also knew that he couldn't tell others about such secretive things at will. After all, the matter involved the Sorting Hat and the sorting ceremony of Hogwarts. Okay, Draco, don't you think you three little ones are a little too brave to say these things in front of us Gryffindor students? Qin Yu said to Malfoy in a very calm tone. Only then did Malfoy realize that besides the three of them, they were surrounded by Gryffindors, as well as a second-year student and two third-year students. He swallowed and said calmly, If you bully me, Professor Snape will definitely deduct points from your college. Huh. Qin Yu was happy. He turned to the Weasley twins and asked, George, Fred, how many points did I lose last year? A few dozen. There are too many. I can't remember them clearly. The twin brothers looked like they had a bad memory. So, do you think I'm afraid of being deducted by Professor Snape, Jr.? Qin Yu said this and pointed at Malfoy and the other three. Malfoy was stunned. He didn't expect that Qin would be a problem student with so many points deducted. Oh, I remembered. I once deducted points because I chased Jerome, a sophomore in your college, with a sword. Regarding this matter, I don't know about the freshmen in your college. Did Jerome mention it at the meeting or other exchange meeting? Qin Yu continued. Malfoy's already pale face turned even whiter with fear. He had heard more or less that Jerome was afraid of Qin Yu, but he didn't expect that he was actually beaten by him. Let's go. Malfoy felt that he was in danger now and called Crabbe and Goyle to leave in a hurry. At first, they didn't dare to walk too fast, for fear of making too much noise and offending some evil Gryffindors. After walking a certain distance, Malfoy couldn't bear the fear in his heart and started running, faster and faster. Ha ha ha, you made me laugh so hard. George and Fred laughed so hard that they were in tears by the end. Harry and Ron looked confused. Qin, is everything you said true? Harry finally couldn't help but ask. He felt that even if Qin Zhan was the dominant figure in Hogwarts, he would still follow him. Well, that's the power of example, and the harm. Of course it's true, George answered on behalf of Qin Yu. It's just that he wanted to teach Jerome a lesson because that kid bullied Qin's roommate. Fred continued. Well, that's the guy named Elvis, George added. So that's it. Harry breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't mind hanging out with the school bully, it would definitely be very tiring, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to do well. Hermione certainly knew about these things. She watched Qin Yu's performance throughout the whole process and also saw the reactions of Harry and Ron. So, she walked over, poked Qin Yu's chest, and said dissatisfied, Why do you have to pretend to be a bad guy? The way you look just now, if I didn't know the truth, I would have thought you were like a bully. To deal with different people, use different faces. This is the way to survive. Qin Yu sighed seriously, taking the opportunity to teach these children a lesson. Moreover, how can you deal with a naughty kid like Malfoy if you don't be more aggressive? Then, He grabbed Hermione's little hand and said with a smile, "Okay, let's go. We have been training all morning and we are already starving. Yes, let's go to Hagrid's place quickly. We didn't see Anna before, but maybe we can see Qin this time. Yes, Qin, you haven't seen each other for 2 months. Anna must miss you very much. Yes, Anna likes you the most." George and Fred were talking to each other. Little did they know that every time they said a word, Hermione's little face turned cold. At the end, the girl simply stopped, raised her head, and slowly asked, "So, who is Anna?" Although she was smiling when she asked this question, everyone present could feel the chill in her words. George and Fred looked at each other quickly, and then both looked at Qin Yu. "You haven't told Hermione about Anna? This is your fault. Why didn't you tell Hermione about what happened with Anna?" As soon as the two of them finished speaking, Qin Yu felt a pain in his hand before he could scold these two idiots. That's when Hermione's nails dug hard into his flesh. Qin Yu looked over and saw that the girl's mouth was pursed and her eyes were already red. "You two wait." Qin Yu glared at George and Fred fiercely. The two brothers knew they were in trouble and quickly told Harry and Ron to get away. Well, they were just unhappy because they ate too much dog food, so they just fanned the flames. However, the consequences seem to be serious, and I don't know how Qin will teach them a lesson. Chapter 105. Qin Yu thought about his correspondence with Hermione. It seems that the name Anna has never been mentioned. The main thing is that he only mentioned the unicorn once or twice, let alone the name. I know I'm not good enough. Is this senior named Anna a Gryffindor, a Ravenclaw, or a Hufflepuff? She can't be a Slytherin, right? Just after George and Fred left with Harry and Ron, Hermione lowered her head, looked at her toes, and babbled. The tone in which he tried his best to restrain himself was really aggrieved. Only she knew that no matter how proud and positive she acted, among these students who all came from wizarding families, she would inevitably have a feeling of inferiority or frustration in her heart. She is eager to prove herself, so she is very active in everything. She also longed to be not just a so-called sister when standing with Qin, but a wizard who, even if not as good as him, could be called good enough. However, now a girl named Anna suddenly appeared, directly breaking the calm she had tried to maintain and releasing all the inferiority, fear, and worry hidden in her heart. Anna, a name that sounds like a princess, must also be like a princess, noble, elegant, and extremely talented. Thinking of this, Hermione felt as if her heart was blocked by something. Her nose felt sour, and her tears could no longer be controlled. They fell like broken beads. Hermione's reaction caught Qin Yu off guard. He originally wanted to explain immediately, but when the girl was having an emotional outburst, a sudden explanation would prevent her from venting her emotions. Qin Yu didn't know if there was any theoretical support for this. He just instinctively felt that a simple misunderstanding of species, misunderstanding a unicorn as a human, would not cause such a big reaction. So, does this girl have something else on her mind? Qin Yu thought in his heart while holding Hermione in his arms. When a person is angry or happy, many times it is not simply caused by something. For example, if you have a big fight with your best friend, the trigger may be just because the other person said something that was too harsh. However, both of you actually know that the root cause may be traced back to a few days ago. Qin Yu knew this, so he also tried his best to think about this girl's mentality. Then, he could more or less guess that it was related to the fact that she was in a new group and was under too much psychological pressure. Thinking of this, Qin Yu couldn't help but blame himself. After so many days of school, I only took care of this girl to play with, and I was more or less immersed in the joy of being able to go to school together. Instead, I ignored the sensitive changes in her mentality. Even if Hermione is smart, she is only a young girl. The little girl has not experienced too many things. She will definitely need time to adapt to the sudden change in her environment. Qin Yu gently stroked the girl's back until he felt the shirt on his chest was soaked, until Hermione gradually stopped crying. Qin, am I stupid? The girl in her arms said something with a heavy nasal voice and a shaky voice. Yes, you are stupid. Qin Yu stroked her long brown hair and said softly. Then you? Just go find the one named Anna. I still have history of magic homework that I haven't finished yet. Yes, I'm going to do my homework. Hermione resisted the urge to cry again, not knowing what she was saying. After she said this, she wanted to break away from Qin's arms, but found that he hugged her tighter, as if he was trying to rub her into his body. It's like this every time, and I think a hug will be enough. Have you ever hugged that person named Anna in the same way? Hermione became more and more angry when she thought of this, and used more strength to break free from Qin's arms. However, after all, he was not as powerful as Qin, so his efforts were all in vain. You forced me. Hermione raised her head and looked at his face, her eyes red, thinking viciously in her heart. Then, she stood up slightly on her toes, stretched her neck, and bit Qin Yu's shoulder. Since the weather in early autumn was not too cold, and Qin Yu participated in Quidditch training today, he wore very thin clothes. At this time, there was only a layer of clothing between Hermione's bite. When she entered her mouth, she tasted the familiar salty taste again. I clearly liked it just now, but now I find that I hate it so much. Even the guy in front of me is so annoying. Thinking of this, the girl's heart became angry, and she used 2 rows of neat teeth to bite hard beef shank. Hiss! The sound of gasping for air due to pain rang in her ears, which made Hermione relieved a lot, so she increased her strength. Huh? The voice seemed a little more painful. You deserve it. Who made you so annoying? Hermione thought to herself. The sound sounded like it was extremely painful. Did I push too hard? He must be in pain. Now Hermione was a little panicked, especially when she felt a trace of rust coming between her lips and teeth. She has bitten his shoulder. When she realized this, Hermione suddenly let go of her mouth and raised her head to look at him, her eyes full of panic and horror. Now, I guess I can't even be my sister. Qin. Hermione opened her mouth and said. However, as soon as she started to speak, those gentle lips tapped her eyes one by one. This made her originally chaotic heart calm down instantly. All the anger, resentment, and panic just now seemed to disappear in an instant. Then, her originally tense body relaxed instantly, and she seemed to have lost all her strength, leaning against his arms without wanting to get up. Are you feeling better? Qin Yu said warmly, stroking the girl's long hair. Much better. Hermione nodded in his arms and then asked guiltily, Do you feel any pain? It hurts. Qin Yu said miserably. Then, I'll let you bite it back, okay? Hermione raised her head and said with an apologetic look. She couldn't think of any other way to undo what she had just done. No. Qin Yu shook his head decisively. Aren't you ready to forgive me? The girl pursed her lips and looked about to cry again. Because I don't want to let go, my dear Miss Granger. Qin Yu said this and pinched the girl's face. It was my fault just now. I don't know what happened. In short, I will only be your sister from now on. You, Anna, or Anne, I don't even care. Hermione apologized at first, but in the end, her originally calm tone became more and more aggrieved. Qin Yu hugged the girl tightly again and murmured, How could I treat you as my sister? Huh, what do you mean by that? Hermione's heart moved, and she blinked and looked at him. What do you mean? Let's wait until you grow up. Qin Yu said calmly. When will that take place? The girl continued to ask. I think we can refer to the age mentioned by Aunt Jenny. Qin Yu replied. Hermione's face instantly turned red when she heard this. So, what exactly did you think of? Qin Yu was once again curious about what Granger and his daughter talked about that day. After crying for a while, he bit Qin Yu again, and then heard something he wanted to hear from him. Hermione felt much better. The wound on Qin Yu's shoulder was not deep. After all, even if the little girl lost control of her emotions, she didn't use too much force and could just deal with it simply. The clothes that were soaked by Hermione's tears were even easier to handle. The little girl knew a lot of simple magic spells and helped Qin Yu dry them herself. She also carefully smoothed the wrinkles so that others could do it. Nothing can be seen. Then, Qin Yu took her hand and continued walking towards Hagrid's cabin. So, it's just that Anna likes you, and you don't like her, right? Hermione thought this guess was more reasonable. After all, Qin's favorite must be her sister. Well, more than just a sister. Who knew? Qin Yu shook his head and said, No, I actually like Anna quite a bit. She is very beautiful. When Hermione heard this, her originally calm eyes instantly lit up with small flames. She had just vented her feelings, but her inferiority complex had gone somewhere, leaving only endless anger and fighting spirit. I think if you meet Anna, you will definitely like her, Qin Yu said with a smile. Seeing the fire in Hermione's eyes that seemed to burn him to death, Qin Yu was completely relieved and was not in a hurry to explain. So, he pulled the girl who seemed to be about to explode at any moment and continued to move forward with a smile on his lips. Damn, since this girl has the potential to be a bit Yandra, how can I improve the CP matching degree if I don't commit suicide? Dimensional wall. Knife it. I also want to update it earlier, but if I could write it earlier, I wouldn't have to wait until now, and my eyelids will start to fight. Okay, I won't say anything more, and I will try to keep updating in the future. Chapter 106. From the Quidditch pitch to Hagrid's cabin, you have to pass through a large lawn. The wild daisies swaying in the wind, the small beetles flying up and landing in the grass, and the unique fragrance of autumn grass floating in the air gradually calmed down Hermione's originally angry mood. When she walked through a hillside and could see the small wooden house in the distance, the girl broke away from Qin Yu's hand and started running on the grass. In Qin Yu's view, this girl was like a graceful little butterfly, passing through the weeds and wild flowers. Soon, the little butterfly came to the fence outside the wooden house. Then, Qin Yu, who caught up slowly, squatted down in front of her and helped her remove the grass blades and prickly cockleburrs stuck to the hem of her robe and socks. Hermione, on the other hand, followed his example and put her hand on his black hair and touched it. Unexpectedly, a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, because the touch reminded her of the little yellow cat they raised, Crookshanks. Crookshanks is mine, and so are you, the girl murmured. Huh, what did you say? Qin Yu took off the last hay stem from her cotton stockings, raised his head, and asked doubtfully. I said, let's go meet your friends. Hermione emphasized the word friends. After saying this, she also hooked Qin's chin and raised her eyebrows proudly. The two of them were moving up and down, and Qin Yu immediately felt that his momentum was weakened by 3 points. However, I somehow feel that this girl is a bit handsome, so what's wrong with her? Putting these thoughts away, Qin Yu grabbed Hermione's hand that was stretched out to him and stood up with a little help. Then, he took the girl's little hand and walked towards the wooden house. Wow, look who this beautiful and spirited little girl is. It was Hagrid who opened the door for them, with unconcealable joy in his hearty voice. Nice to see you again, Hagrid. Hermione greeted the giant with a smile. Qin Yu also waved to Hagrid and said, long time no see. Then, he felt a burst of force in the little hand in his hand, and the owner of the hand was looking into the room. The house is not big, and there are not many people. There were George and Fred, who looked anxious, and Harry and Ron, who each had a piece of cake and were chewing on it but obviously didn't want to. There is no one else left. This made Hermione, who had been quite prepared, frown slightly. She looked at Qin Yu and asked hesitantly, is the others not here yet? Everyone is here. You are the last two. Uncle Hagrid answered for Qin Yu. Then, he enthusiastically promoted his new rock biscuit, the thing that Harry and Ron were nibbling reluctantly. Thanks, Hagrid. Hermione took it subconsciously. After she and Qin sat down next to each other, she leaned into his ear and whispered in his ear, didn't you say that I could see that, Anna? Why isn't she here? You can see it later. Qin Yu continued to show off, and at the same time snatched the pancake that the girl was about to put into her mouth. I haven't eaten yet, Hermione said dissatisfiedly. Believe me, you won't regret not trying it. After Qin Yu said this, he took a bite and chewed it with difficulty. Seeing the painful look on his face as he struggled to eat the cake, Hermione burst out laughing. Well, Qin told her with practical actions that Hagrid's cake was indeed not suitable for her teeth. Well, Hermione's emotional out of control just now was actually more due to the pressure accumulated during this period, and it was much better to release it. This was due to Qin Yu's constant company. After she woke up, she felt that Anna was suspicious even more. Based on the many clues so far, how could Hermione still not guess that Anna was probably not the same person? The only thing she's not sure about now is what Anna is. Maybe it's a puppy, or a cute owl. Clever Miss Granger considered the possibilities in her mind. Looking at Qin Yu and Hermione sitting there talking quietly, especially seeing Hermione laughing, George and Fred breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Because, just before Qin brought Hermione here, they solemnly asked Hagrid and asked him if he would stop the two brothers if they were chased by Qin. And Hagrid's answer was, Qin did what I have always wanted to do, why should I stop him? Such an answer made George and Fred extremely sad and disheartened. Now seeing Hermione smiling happily, even if they were fed a mouthful of dog food, at least they felt relieved and no longer had to worry about their lives being in danger. Thinking of this, they all felt much better when they ate Hagrid's rock biscuits. When the beautiful unicorn walked out of the forbidden forest with brisk and elegant steps, Qin Yu and the others were preparing a picnic in the open space in front of the wooden house. The rock cake was obviously just an appetizer. The first one of them to see the unicorn was Hermione. When the sun shines on the white body of the unicorn, her whole body reflects dazzling light, looking noble and mysterious. Hermione was stunned as she watched the magical creature walking towards them. She wiped her eyes subconsciously, because she thought she might be dazzled and hallucinating. However, It turns out that she really did see a legendary unicorn. She must be Anna, Hermione said softly. Such a beautiful princess-like creature should have such a beautiful princess-like name. The question I had just been thinking about suddenly had a clear answer. Yes, she is Anna. Qin's voice sounded in her ears. After 2 months of absence, Anna's coat color has changed from golden to snow white, declaring that she has reached adulthood. In some way, she sensed that Qin Yu was nearby and came over happily. After George and Fred saw the unicorn, they excitedly took out the carrots they had washed and ran to please her. However, they saw some unkind looks from Qin Yu. The two of them stopped immediately and handed the carrot to Hermione obediently. Between Anna and Hermione, they wisely chose to please the latter. Unicorns like to eat cleanly washed carrots, Qin Yu explained to his sister. Oh, I see. Then, can I go feed her? Hermione said with stars in her eyes. Of course, I'll take you there, Qin Yu said, pulling Hermione to meet the unicorn Anna. George, Fred, can we go too? Ron came over and asked his 2 brothers. Yeah, we want to go too. Harry really wanted to go along. You just want to go? We still want to go. I don't know if it was George or Fred who muttered. They knew they were in the wrong, so they naturally did not dare to disturb Qin Yu, Hermione, and Anna's interactions at this time. After Anna saw Qin Yu approaching, she walked happily on the spot. Ever since she was rescued by this human boy in the forest, her heart has been completely impressed by him, full of admiration and dependence on him. There was no way the young unicorn suddenly encountered a disaster, and a human boy saved her at the critical moment. How could that not be a deep impression? Anna, long time no see. Qin Yu greeted the little unicorn. Anna snorted lightly, then rubbed Qin Yu's clothes. Let me introduce you. This is Hermione, a member of my family. Qin Yu pulled Hermione to the unicorn and introduced him. Hi, Anna. Nice to meet you. The girl waved nervously to Anna. The unicorn looked at Qin Yu, then at Hermione, then reached over and took a bite of the carrot in the girl's hand. Qin. She ate. Hermione said excitedly, grabbing Qin Yu's arm. It seems she likes you very much, Qin Yu said with a smile. Just like that, Hermione surrounded the little unicorn and fed 2 carrots in succession. The whole process was as cautious and exciting as a starstruck girl. Anna didn't stay here for too long. After chatting with Qin Yu for a while and eating a few carrots, she turned back to the Forbidden Forest because the call of the big unicorn Kelly came from the Forbidden Forest. Voice. I don't know why, but since the summer vacation, the animals in the Forbidden Forest have been feeling uneasy. Hagrid looked at the leaving unicorn and said in a low voice. And there was unconcealed worry in his tone. Maybe they sensed some kind of danger coming. Qin Yu couldn't help but look in the direction of Hogwarts Castle. I don't know. I hope nothing big will happen. Hagrid scratched his head and said. The unicorn came and went in a hurry, but George and Fred were reluctant to leave. After finally meeting each other, Anna didn't even take a bite of their carrots, which made them very regretful. Even more regretful than them were Harry and Ron. Both little boys saw unicorns for the first time in their lives, but they only spent a while with Qin and Hermione before turning around and leaving. The 2 of them really wished they could become Qin's sister, so that they could feed the beautiful and mysterious unicorn carrots with their own hands. Unfortunately, this is impossible, and they can only feel envious. Fortunately, the rest of the picnic was pretty good. Under Qin's command, George and Fred grilled a lot of delicious things, including kebabs, grilled vegetables, and grilled mushrooms, which made everyone enjoy themselves. After the picnic, Uncle Hagrid made a large pot of tea, and everyone sat around to drink tea and chat. During this time, Hagrid asked about Harry's life after arriving at Hogwarts, and Harry told him from beginning to end. I think Professor Snape definitely doesn't like me, and even hates me. The little boy came to such a conclusion after mentioning his experience in potions class. Nonsense, how could it be possible? Hagrid said immediately. Harry, I know something about Professor Snape. It's not that he really hates you, but that he doesn't know how to deal with the relationship between you, Qin Yu said, carefully considering the words. Yes, if you ask me, Snape is too vindictive. Oh, it's not just about vengeance. He may blame himself more. After all, as Hagrid spoke, he suddenly realized that there was something wrong with him. It was inconvenient to say more, so I quickly shut up. After all, what? Harry looked at Hagrid blankly. Nothing. I think that's the end of today's picnic. I still have some work to do, huh? Hagrid changed the subject awkwardly. I happen to have something to do, so let's clean it up together. Qin Yu continued. There are too many grievances between Snape and Harry's parents' generation that cannot be explained in one sentence, and this is not the right time to talk about them. Then, Qin Yu and others helped Uncle Hagrid clean the picnic items and bring them into the house. While they were cleaning up the room, Harry found a new issue of the Daily Prophet and read a report about the theft of Gringotts. Chapter 107. Qin, the date mentioned here is the day you and Hagrid took me to Diagon Alley. That day happened to be my birthday. I remember it very clearly. Harry pointed to the contents of the newspaper and said. When Qin Yu heard this, he looked at Hagrid, who quickly dodged his eyes and looked away. Let me see. Qin Yu took the newspaper from Harry's hand. I saw it said, regarding the theft of the Gringotts vault on July 31st, the wizard who committed the theft has still not been caught. The goblin spokesperson of Gringotts pointed out that they had received the information long before the thief entered Gringotts. Warning, the security force was increased. Not only did the thief fail to steal any items in the Gringotts vault, but he was also seriously injured. Moreover, the contents of the vault that the thief went to was also taken away that day. As for what it was, Gringotts officials said they had no comment and reiterated that Gringotts security is trustworthy as always. Qin Yu had seen reports of the theft of the Gringotts vault before, but there was no new progress this time because they still had not caught the thief. Emphasizing that the thief was seriously injured and that nothing was lost is probably to save some face. After all, security is a bank's reputation and even its life. Qin, do you think that thing in Gringotts is? Harry whispered to Qin Yu, and finally looked at Hagrid. His suspicion was not unfounded. The time was right, it was July 31st, and the things were right. Hagrid took the small paper package from the vault that afternoon. And, most importantly, since it was Professor Dumbledore who told Hagrid to take something away, it must be something extraordinary. Even if the small paper bag looks ordinary, there is a high chance that it will be targeted by thieves. I can't give you an answer to this question, Qin Yu said with a shrug. Of course he knew who that person was and what the target of that person's theft was, but it would be in vain because it would only cause a new time backtracking. Then, Qin Yu looked at Hagrid again, hoping that Uncle Hagrid, who was tight-lipped, could tell the story. Don't look at me. I really have a lot of unfinished work. Hagrid avoided the eyes of Qin Yu and Harry, and then stuffed the rock cakes she made into their hands, and said in his mouth, "Take it back. If you are hungry at night, you can eat a piece to satisfy your hunger." Who would be okay eating this? Everyone was holding cakes as hard as stone, and these words came to their minds at the same time. On the way back to Hogwarts Castle, Harry carried a pocket full of rock biscuits and was always worried. He wanted to exchange his views with Qin Yu, but for a while he didn't know where to start. After all, he couldn't explain many of his ideas clearly, and it was even more difficult to explain them to Qin. What's more, the person he was most curious about was Snape. There is one thing that Harry has never told anyone. That is, when he first saw Snape in the Great Hall on the first day of school, he felt the scar on his forehead hurt for a while, which made him think that this gloomy potions professor might it's related to the legendary Voldemort. In fact, Snape really fit Harry's idea of a Death Eater, cold, arrogant, and fierce. However, Hagrid did not want to say much about Snape, and Qin seemed to have a good relationship with Snape. Could it be that Qin? No, how can I doubt Qin? I will never doubt Qin in this life. Harry felt that his mind was too confused. These things are simply not something that a child who has just entered first grade should think about. It is really more tiring than attending several classes. Stop thinking all day long. What you have to do now is to enjoy the campus life at Hogwarts. Moreover, only if you learn magic, well, can you solve various problems. Qin Yu patted Harry on the shoulder and said, "Well, I understand, Qin." Harry thought for a moment and nodded solemnly. He felt that what Qin said made sense, and he still had to focus on learning magic. Otherwise, even if he knew who the bad guys were, he would not be able to deal with them. Soon after entering the castle, several people separated. Qin Yu and Hermione were going to the library to read. Harry and Ron returned to the Gryffindor dormitory and gave some pancakes to their roommates for late-night snacks, while brothers George and Fred went there mysteriously for unknown reasons. There's nothing surprising about this. They've always been elusive. Before parting, Qin Yu kindly invited George and Fred to have time to train together. This made the two brothers tremble because the training Qin Yu mentioned was for 3 people to train individually in private, not for the team to train together. It's obvious that I want to settle a score with them. George and Fred looked at Hermione pleadingly, who knew that the little girl also held a grudge. Because of the Weasley brothers' deliberate concealment and misleading, she had already embarrassed herself in front of Qin, so how could she still help them? Therefore, George and Fred could only look at Qin sadly, hoping that he would be merciful and leave them a way to survive. Of course, Qin Yu didn't bother to pay attention to them and pulled Hermione away. What did you and Harry talk about? Hermione asked curiously. Well, let's talk about life. This child is preoccupied and has many ideas. I asked him to focus more on his studies and enjoy life here. Qin Yu thought for a while and said, Oh, Hermione nodded, feeling reassured. Then, she looked at Qin Yu and said seriously, Since you care about him so much, I will definitely take good care of him for you in the future. Take care of him? You are still a child yourself, and you still want to take care of others. Qin Yu was amused by this girl. I've grown up, okay. My birthday will be in a few days. Hermione straightened her body and said, Well, I have grown up and am much taller than last year. Qin Yu patted her head and said, Of course, don't worry. I will supervise the studies of Harry, Ron, Adam, and Neville from now on, Hermione said with her fingers. Counting so many people at once, Hermione suddenly felt a heavy responsibility on her shoulders. Are you sure they will listen to you? Qin Yu said with a raised eyebrow. Isn't there still you? I am the little fox following your tiger. The girl raised her chin and said seriously. She really understood the idiom of a fox pretending to be a tiger. However, the little fox is not following the tiger, but walking in front of the tiger. Qin Yu corrected. Oh, I see. Hermione nodded, then grabbed Qin Yu's arm and said with a smile, I think it depends on the situation. If it is too dangerous, I still hope to hide behind the tiger. Well, this is indeed a cunning little fox. Qin Yu squeezed the girl's soft, boneless hand and pulled her slowly along the corridor to the library, chatting at random. In fact, Qin Yu has been paying attention to the changes in Hermione's mood since she lost control of her mood on the court. Fortunately, after crying and biting, the little girl seemed to be a lot stronger after venting her anger. Of course, Qin Yu didn't think that she had really grown into a strong woman with an invulnerable heart all of a sudden. He just hoped that he wouldn't be so slow in the future and wouldn't find out the problem until she cried. Qin, we seem to be going in the wrong direction. Hermione suddenly reminded. Qin Yu looked around and found that this corridor did not lead to the library, and it was obvious that few people passed by it. Probably because he was just thinking about something, he didn't pay attention to the fork in the road and let Hermione hear by mistake. If you go astray, go astray. Once you get there, make peace with it. There was no one around. So Qin Yu simply held the girl in his arms, dismissing the self-blame and uneasiness he had just felt, and felt a lot more at ease. Then, his lips touched the girl's forehead lightly, and then he said seriously, If I said that I didn't walk into this corridor on purpose, would you believe it? Hermione raised her head, her face flushed, and her eyes couldn't help but blink a few times after hearing his words. Then, she opened her mouth and thought helplessly in her heart. You just said that you walked in on purpose. What can I say? Dimensional wall. In fact, I have written nearly 2,000 words for this chapter in the past 2 days. I always felt that there was something wrong with it, so I didn't post it. Because after Hermione expressed her emotions, she didn't take it back, so she felt that there was something short in the narrative. I added the ending today, and I managed to contain my emotions before posting it. The most important thing is that recently I feel that there are some problems with the arrangement of the plot, not only the plot points, but also the roles of the protagonist and supporting characters. How should I put it? I can't find that comfortable feeling anymore, so to speak. The whole story is a bit on the verge of getting out of control, which is why I was struggling during this period. Then, I watched an American drama in the past few days, Stranger Things. This drama is a very typical contained storytelling drama. The plot relies on the characters to push forward little by little, while the core suspense setting is hidden. This has inspired me to some extent, but I don't know if I can also write a more comfortable and smooth plot. I also know that as a fan writer, I don't need to be too entangled, but when I get stuck, it's really uncomfortable to write. I hope I can smooth it out slowly. Okay, that's all. I wish you all a happy weekend. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 108. The two of them delayed for some time, and after taking a detour, Qin Yu finally took Hermione to the library on the second floor of the castle. In the library, Hermione found many books about flying to read, because she was still a little unsure about the flying lessons she was going to take, and wanted to increase her knowledge of flying through reading books. After all, she experienced flying on a broomstick for the first time today, and she still had Qin by her side. Her books also included a book called The Magical Quidditch, which gave her a more comprehensive understanding of this sport that is closely related to flying and knew its origin, development, and status quo and various rules. There are more than 700 foul actions. Can the referee remember them? Hermione stuck out her tongue and said in surprise. You have to ask Mrs. Hooch. Qin Yu shrugged, then raised the corner of his mouth and said jokingly, but most of the time, I think Mrs. Hooch judges whether the player has violated the rules based on feeling. Mrs. Hooch is the flying teacher and chief Quidditch referee at Hogwarts. She is the referee for large-scale inter-house Quidditch games, and she is also responsible for the recruitment and selection of Quidditch players. Qin Yu's words made Hermione chuckle, and then the little girl said regretfully, the book doesn't write down the specific methods of fouling. Otherwise, if I write them down, I might be able to apply to be the referee of our college team. There is a reason why I didn't write it down, Qin Yu replied. What's the reason? Hermione asked curiously. If you write it down, there is a high probability that others will imitate it and use it, which will cause even more headaches for the referees, Qin Yu explained. Oh, okay. So, I probably won't have a chance to join the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Hermione sighed and said helplessly. She thought about it carefully. The goalkeeper needs steady and solid flying skills, the batter needs the drive to kill everyone, the chaser needs the courage to fight, and the seeker needs keen eyesight and superb flight speed. If she wanted to join the Quidditch team, and refereeing seemed to be the best fit for her. However, reality is not always satisfactory, and the book did not teach her how to become a Quidditch referee. You can't learn this just by reading books. If you really want to be a referee, you can usually participate in our training. You can also learn some Quidditch knowledge from Moni. She will occasionally guest star as our referee. Believe me, Hermione knows far more about Quidditch than what is in this book. Seeing that Hermione was very serious and didn't seem to be joking, Qin Yu said this to her after thinking about it. Moni? Hermione asked confused. That's the girl with short brown hair that I met on the train. She is a cousin of the Weasley family. Qin Yu introduced briefly. Well, I remembered. She is a girl with a very cheerful personality. Hermione obviously still had an impression of her. Scott, you're eating these snot-like gummies in the library again. Do you think the library's rules are optional nonsense? A stern female voice suddenly sounded. Yes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Pinksy. I'm really hungry, a boy wearing glasses said timidly. Then, you go out now, fill your belly, wash your hands, and come back. Okay. The boy left in despair, because the librarian Mrs. Pants's feather duster seemed to be hitting him at any time. And you, don't let me hear your voices again. Mrs. Pinksy looked at Qin Yu and Hermione and said sternly. Hermione immediately shrank her head, and then secretly made a face at Qin Yu. Qin Yu is used to it. Among the students who often come to the library to read or borrow books, who has never experienced Mrs. Pinksy's temper, this is a figure that even Principal Dumbledore must give 3 points of courtesy to, because in the Hogwarts library, Mrs. Pants has the absolute right to speak. Now that this powerful administrator has spoken, Qin Yu will certainly not commit crimes against the odds. He gave Hermione a look and told the girl to read carefully, while he looked through the potions books he had found to prepare for his potions paper. Yes, he didn't come to the library just to spend time with Hermione. He also had something serious to do. In short, soon, both of them began to read the books at hand seriously, as if they were back at home during the summer vacation, when they stayed together quietly like this. The sunshine in the afternoon of autumn shines through the windows into the library of this ancient castle. It is filled with the mist of time, covering the bookshelves full of books, the long wooden tables, and the people who are reading seriously and dare not make a sound. Young wizard. When Hermione got tired from reading, she would rest on Qin Yu's shoulder for a while. Or she picked up a quill pen and drew a few random strokes on the paper, and then she became a little person reading a book. Then she pulled Qin Yu's clothes to let him see her painting, biting her lip to hold back the pain. Let yourself laugh. In exchange for this, Qin Yu pinched her cheek, and then drew another villain next to her. The painting is so ugly. She commented on the previous sentence in a low voice with dissatisfaction, because the little person he added was obviously her. In this way, they successfully missed dinner time. Fortunately, Qin Yu has some food in his dormitory. The two had their dinner in the Gryffindor common room. Hermione also tasted the rock cake given by Hagrid with great interest, but she could only take one bite. In the next few days, life at Hogwarts was uneventful. Of course, Hermione was still a little troubled. She found that she might not be able to fulfill her promise of taking care of Harry, Ron, Adam, and Neville, supervise the study of several of them. This task is very simple. However, Malfoy, who can't stand Slytherin, is always provocative. During our first flying lesson, Neville accidentally broke his arm and was sent to the school doctor. Then, his memory ball was picked up by Malfoy, Harry went and asked him for it, but Malfoy didn't give it. So the two of them rode broomsticks to grab it in the sky. Then, Harry was taken away by the angry Professor McGonagall. During lunchtime on Thursday, Hermione said, "Tell Qin Yu what happened in the morning." What happened next? Qin Yu was somewhat disapproving. Later, he didn't come back. After Hermione finished saying this, she then said with a lot of self-blame, "It's all my fault that I failed to stop Harry and let him get into trouble. Qin, do you think he will be fired?" Qin Yu took a bite of the bacon steak, chewed it carefully, and muttered, "It will definitely not be fired. If he is fired, the hard work of fighting Voldemort cannot fall on me. What are you fighting for? What kind of chore?" Because he spoke very vaguely, Hermione didn't hear clearly, so she asked with some confusion, "It's nothing. You will know when Harry comes here later. He will definitely be fine." "Oh, okay. Does that taste good?" "It's not bad. It's made by wrapping the steak pieces with bacon and grilling it. The saltiness of the bacon and the tenderness of the beef are combined together. The taste is quite unique. Do you want to try it?" "Gulu." "Okay. Then, open your mouth awu." Since Qin Yu said it was okay and there was delicious food on hand, Hermione put aside those little worries for the time being and concentrated on eating. Moreover, as Qin Yu expected, Harry quickly came to the auditorium, lowered his voice, and excitedly told Qin Yu and others about his experience. It turned out that Harry was snatching the egg-sized memory ball in the flying class and was accidentally caught by Professor McGonagall, who introduced him to Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, because Harry was snatching the memory ball in the sky. This scene made Professor McGonagall think that Gryffindor just lacked an excellent seeker. "So, I am the second player after Qin to join the Quidditch Academy team in the first grade in recent years," Harry said with burning eyes. When he thought that he had joined the Quidditch team in the first grade like Qin, he was excited to follow the path that Qin had taken. However, it is difficult for others to understand such a mood. After all, over the years, they were the only two who became Quidditch players so early. However, Oliver would ask Harry to keep this matter secret for the time being and not let too many people know about it, so that when the competition comes, the opponents will not know their true and false facts so clearly. In this regard, Qin Yu certainly feels that it is necessary. The arena is like a battlefield, and there is no harm in having multiple minds. Then, unknowingly, Malfoy thought that Harry Potter was going to be kicked out of Hogwarts and glanced at them with gloating from time to time. Of course, he didn't dare to come over and make sarcastic remarks because he was a little afraid of getting beaten. Isn't it just relying on Qin as a backer? What will happen even if he is here? Can he be more powerful than Professor McGonagall? Malfoy thought to himself. At this moment, he wished he could have a senior like Qin, so that he could severely humiliate that Harry Potter. Unfortunately, he wasn't as lucky as Harry. Chapter 109. While the little wizards at Hogwarts are learning magic, Diagon Alley is still busy with people coming and going. In the evening, the handsome clerk at Florin's cold drink shop will take advantage of his free time to go to the warehouse behind the shop to inventory the goods and receive cream, condensed milk, white sugar, trehalose, and various jams shipped from faraway places. These things are important materials for making ice cream. Then, he will take these things out of the carton one by one, and then put them on the material storage shelf in an orderly manner for easy access at any time. Obviously, as a wizard, he does not need to move them by himself. He only needs a few simple sorting spells to complete the work skillfully. After doing this, he waved his wand again and pointed at the pile of empty cardboard boxes. A flame suddenly rose up, instantly wrapping those cardboard boxes into flames. When he saw the last trace of fire extinguished, leaving only a pile of warm ashes, he nodded lightly with satisfaction, then leaned over and picked out 7 pale golden metal discs from the ashes. Each disc is the size of a gold coin. He wiped it clean carefully and put it into a metal cylinder engraved with simple and complicated patterns. 7 pieces, just enough to fill the cylinder. After he closed the lid of the cylinder, he put it away and put it in his pocket. Soon after, the cold drink shop clerk, who always had a smile on his face, went outside for a walk. When he came back again, his pockets were empty. Not long after he returned to the store, a tall, bearded giant walked out of a wizard's pharmacy in another part of Diagon Alley. "Seriously, give me some acromantula venom next time. Many customers are anxious to get it." The pharmacy owner's voice sounded behind the giant, with a hint of sincerity in his tone. "Sorry, I can't make the decision on this matter. You can send a letter to Hogwarts for communication," the bearded giant said in a muffled voice. "Oh, it's not like I haven't written a letter to ask. Forget it. I'll write another letter and ask." The boss said helplessly. Well, see you later. See you later. The giant, acting as a drugstore owner, wandered around Diagon Alley, bought some of his favorite drinks and food, and filled his pockets. When passing an alley at number 93 Diagon Alley, he turned in, and when no one was paying attention, he took out a red umbrella and tapped the wall a few times with the tip of the umbrella. Soon, a gap appeared in the wall. He reached in and took out something from inside. As night fell, a visitor arrived in the Hogwarts principal's office, the bearded giant who had returned from Diagon Alley. After he came in, he threw a gray drawstring bag onto Dumbledore's desk. In the process, the bag made a jingling sound. There are a lot of them this time. All 7 secret mailboxes are full, he said with some worry. It seems that there has been a lot of trouble recently. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows slightly and sighed. Hopefully these troubles will stay away from the school. Since you said that, you must have felt something. I don't know either. I just have a very uncomfortable feeling. The two chatted for a few more words, and the giant left here. Then, he walked alone outside the castle, and finally returned to a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. In the wooden house, he pointed the red umbrella into the fireplace, and a flame ignited inside, quickly dispelling the autumn chill in the room. Then, he baked sausages and pancakes next to the fireplace for today's dinner. Thinking of Dumbledore's words, he was a little stunned. It wasn't until his nose smelled the smell of burnt meat that he suddenly woke up. I don't want to let Dumbledore and the others worry about these things. I just have to do my own thing. The giant shook his head and put the troubles behind him, then concentrated on grilling the sausages and swallowed from time to time. He was so hungry, especially after thinking about various problems, that he urgently needed to eat a lot of food. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, Qin Yu dragged his tired body back to the Gryffindor public rest area. There he met an anxiously waiting Hermione. Something's going to happen, Qin. Hermione said the first thing she said after seeing Qin Yu. What's wrong? Qin Yu asked curiously. Then, Hermione told him something that made her very angry. After dinner, after you left, Malfoy had a conflict with Harry. Malfoy made an appointment with Harry for a wizard's duel tonight. Huh, wizard's duel? Have they learned any magic spells for fighting? Qin Yu felt that 2 first-grade wizards were dueling, and it was like a kindergarten kid having a date with each other. I don't know. Hermione shook her head and then said angrily, I asked Harry not to agree to such a meaningless thing. But Harry said that you also helped your classmates teach Slytherin a lesson when you were in 1st grade. A good person. If he says you can do something, he should work hard to do it. After the little girl said this, she looked at Qin Yu with complicated eyes. She never expected that the tiger she relied on would become an excuse to gag her. Therefore, the power of role models is terrible. No matter what behavior you perform, it is easy to be imitated by admirers. Well, idols are responsible for fan behavior. Ha, this kid. Qin Yu twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled awkwardly. I actually don't want to speak ill of Harry behind his back, but don't you think his whole attitude has changed since he became the Quidditch Seeker? Hermione said with a frown. Indeed. This child is a little bit arrogant. This is normal, after all. He is still young. Qin Yu sighed helplessly. So, what he should learn most is your stability. The little girl crossed her arms in front of her chest and said seriously. Seeing her like this, Qin Yu was amused. In that case, let him hit the wall by himself. Although Qin Yu didn't remember whether there was a duel, he instinctively felt that Malfoy was causing trouble, and Harry was obviously angered by Malfoy's provocation and hastily agreed to the so-called duel. Since it is a conflict between children, let them resolve it themselves. Qin Yu felt that he did not need to intervene too much. But, our college will be deducted points. Hermione said rather reluctantly. As long as no one finds out. Oh, by the way, do you know the specific time and place they made an appointment? Qin Yu asked. At midnight in the trophy room. Hermione knew better. Then, if you are really worried, I will follow them secretly to prevent them from being discovered by the night guard. Qin Yu thought for a while and said, I'm going too, Hermione said, grabbing his arm. Seeing the eager look in this girl's eyes, Qin Yu couldn't tell for a moment whether she really cared about Harry and the others, or whether she wanted to watch the fun. However, no matter what, if you follow me, nothing big will happen. So, after thinking for a moment, Qin Yu nodded in agreement. Okay then, let's meet here at about 11:50. Yeah. Hermione nodded sharply, her eyes bright. This excitement. You just want to watch the excitement. Qin Yu is now leaning toward this possibility. However, plans cannot keep up with changes. Just as Qin Yu was lying on the bed waiting to meet Hermione at 12 o'clock, and then following Harry and Ron, a few lines of words appeared in front of his eyes. Qin, if you haven't gone to bed, please come to my office and see me. Albus Dumbledore. Chapter 110. Qin Yu had no idea how Dumbledore's words appeared in front of him, but he only guessed that it must be some kind of very clever information transmission spell. Since Lao Deng asked him to go there now, there is a high probability that he has something important to say. So, Qin Yu summoned an owl and sent a text message to Hermione, informing her that he had something to do tonight and that the tracking plan was cancelled, leaving Harry and the others to do their own thing. Then, he followed Dumbledore's message and went to the principal's office on the 8th floor of the castle. Sorry, Qin, I didn't notice that it was so late just now. I wanted to send you a message after I realized this, but I found that you are no longer in the dormitory. When we met, Lao Deng said apologetically. From his words, Qin Yu knew two things. First, the matter is not too urgent, but Dumbledore obviously pays more attention to it. Second, the message transmission spell probably requires knowing the location of the recipient in advance. Otherwise, Qin Yu would have received Dumbledore's message asking him to go back to sleep on the way, and he would not have had to come over. These thoughts flashed past. Qin Yu shrugged and said, "It's okay, Professor Dumbledore. I just have insomnia and I didn't fall asleep." Of course he wouldn't say that he was waiting to follow Harry and others who were causing trouble with Hermione. "Okay, let's get down to business," Dumbledore said, motioning for the little oriental boy to sit down on the chair. Just after Qin Yu sat down, an exquisite white porcelain teapot with gold embroidery flew slowly in front of him, and then tilted gracefully, pouring an orange-red water line into an equally exquisite teacup on the table next to him. "You don't seem to like adding milk or sugar to your tea. I remember correctly, right?" Dumbledore asked with a smile. "Yes, Professor. I am still used to drinking the original taste of black tea." Qin Yu nodded. The last time he drank tea in the principal's office seemed to be the time Lucius came. Obviously, he didn't like adding any messy things to the tea. "Before I talk about those troublesome things, let me give you a gift first. This thing was just delivered to me today. I just took this opportunity to give it to you." Dumbledore said this, picked up a slender wooden box on the table, and handed it over. The moment Qin Yu received the wooden box, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Because he saw the logo of Ollivander's Wand Shop on the wooden box, as well as the shop slogan that represents professional wand making for more than 2,000 years, it has been making excellent wands since 382 BC. This is... Qin Yu couldn't help but look at Lao Deng. "That's right, a new wand." Dumbledore didn't show off. "I commissioned Mr. Ollivander to customize it. Its core uses phoenix tail feathers." After hearing his words, Qin Yu subconsciously glanced at Phoenix Fox, who was squatting and napping in midair. As if he felt Qin Yu's gaze, Fox raised his eyelids and glanced at him lazily, then closed his eyes and continued to sleep. "He is so cold and cold, worthy of being a phoenix. Well, I just like how you look at me with such indifferent eyes," Qin Yu secretly praised. Opening the wooden box, he saw a gray-white wand lying inside. "You can try it out and see if it works for you," Dumbledore suggested. "Good." With the wand in his hand, Qin Yu's first impression was that it was slightly heavier than the one he had before, and it was obviously longer. However, he tried waving it and found it just right. Presumably, Mr. Ollivander took into account his physical growth in the past year. Then he closed his eyes and experienced it carefully. He felt as if the wand in his hand had become an extension of his arm, and the wand core made of phoenix tail feathers also screamed at this moment. What he didn't know was that at this moment, Phoenix Fox cast another look. This time, Fox's eyes were a little more thoughtful and solemn. On Qin Yu's side, when he heard the chirp of the phoenix's tail feathers, he also felt the joy and excitement it conveyed. So, he suddenly opened his eyes, raised his right hand holding the wand, drew a powerful trajectory in the air, and said in his mouth, "Incendio!" Immediately, the room was filled with fire, the temperature suddenly rose, and a blazing flame shot out, threatening to burn down Dumbledore's desk. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Dumbledore waved his wand casually, and the flames were eliminated with ease, as if they had never appeared. "I'm sorry, Professor. I didn't control my strength well," Qin Yu said quickly. If he had followed his original wand and his feeling of casting the spell just now, the fire spell shouldn't be so powerful. And this phoenix tail feather serves as the core of the wand, which obviously enhances the magic spell. "It doesn't matter. That's why I gave you this wand," Dumbledore responded with a smile. His words made Qin Yu think more about it. "Sure enough," Dumbledore continued, "although you are still young, and I had planned to expose you to these things in a few years, The development of the situation seems to be getting more and more beyond my expectations. In Qin Yu's view, Dumbledore's brows were obviously more worried when he said these words. The greatest wizard in the world was like a troubled old man, thinking about some difficult problems. Well, Qin Yu almost forgot that Dumbledore is indeed an old man who is over 100 years old. Perhaps I was used to only seeing Dumbledore's strength and ignoring his age. Is it related to what I discovered at Christmas? Qin Yu asked tentatively. During the last Christmas vacation, Qin Yu accidentally stumbled upon the transaction of two suspicious wizards in Diagon Alley and roughly guessed their identities, a Death Eater and a GA member. See Chapter 53 of this book for details. The most important thing is that he seized a bottle of suspicious black liquid that can turn mice into zombie. According to Professor Swinton's research and analysis, it is a product of life alchemy, which comes from the dark alchemy of the North American witch god cult. Its functions are not limited to creating zombie mice. There must be many more. As for its specific uses, Professor Swinton did not study it clearly in the follow-up. After all, the samples were too small to test too many times. See Chapter 56 of this book for details. In short, the meeting between Death Eaters and GA members was not a good sign. So Qin Yu thought of them immediately. Well, it has something to do with that time. Those people who were originally only active in South America have now gone to North America. The development speed is indeed beyond my expectation, Dumbledore said, showing a world map like a projection of the Earth in front of Qin Yu. This is the place where those people were first discovered to be active. And then, here, recently, their whereabouts have appeared frequently in North America, and the attitude of the Magical Congress of North America seems very ambiguous. This is also what worries me, and it seems that a considerable number of people in the Magic Congress agree with their views. Lao Deng waved his hand and turned the Earth projection, while introducing the current situation to Qin Yu. Looking at the faint blue flames that lit up little by little on the map, from being concentrated in a certain place in Brazil at first, to eventually becoming dotted and scattered all over North America, Qin Yu really felt a sense of urgency that the fire was about to start a prairie fire. He also didn't expect that the group of people under the banner of Grindelwald would develop so rapidly. This is much more awesome than the huddled Death Eaters. I know, you may feel a little stressed when I tell you this now. Dumbledore also saw Qin Yu's nervousness. You know, but you also said, are you trying to put a burden on me? I'm just in the 2nd grade. Okay, can't you just let me enjoy my 2 years of school in peace? Someone secretly complained in his heart. Of course, Dumbledore couldn't hear what he was saying, so he continued slowly. However, I think you are different from other children. You are mature far beyond your peers, especially when you dealt with Lucius's 2 attacks. The performance. Well, the calmness shown in making things difficult surprised me, and it also satisfied me. Although you acted as if nothing had happened after temporarily changing your words, you actually wanted to talk about your acting skills, right? Qin Yu added in his mind. Anyway, I am telling you this to let you know that there will be many difficulties in the future. You must be mentally prepared, because the future belongs to you. Dumbledore summed up with a smile, and his expression became relaxed. Quite a few, as if they were saying something very interesting. Qin Yu felt that there was nothing interesting about this matter. Of course, he couldn't understand the thoughts of an old man who had lived for more than 100 years. Probably, Lao Deng had different thinking about life, death, and time than young people. He actually wanted to say, if you borrow another 500 years from heaven, then you might not know whose future it will belong to. However, various signs indicate that even as the greatest wizard in the world, Dumbledore is indeed in his twilight years. Even if he is safe and does not encounter any accidents in the future, the old man probably does not have much life left. Perhaps it was precisely because time was running out that Dumbledore wanted to resolve the matter at once. This was also the reason why he made many plans in his later years. Qin Yu thought about all these things and found that there seemed to be not much he could do. However, he knew that at the critical moment, he would definitely stand on the opposite side of those people, because he could not just watch these people around him. People were killed one by one. Since there is no other choice, then it's done. Thinking of this, he felt a lot relieved and no longer felt overwhelmed by the approaching crisis. Qin Yu pinched his wand, chuckled and joked. So, you gave me this wand. Do you want me to use my spare time to fight with Death Eaters or GA? Ha ha ha, you are thinking too much. I have no idea of pushing you to the battlefield. I just thought that you would probably become the backbone of this group of children. I will tell you these things in advance. Moreover, from Professor Snape's words judging from the feedback, you really need a new wand. Dumbledore was amused by Qin Yu, laughed, shook his head, and explained simply. The wand that Qin Yu held previously could not use more lethal black magic. This was due to the wand core, because the unicorn hair wand core repels black magic, and Qin Yu's abilities were unstable. There are too many uncertain factors in using black magic. Now, after-school tutoring from 2 professors, Snape and Swinton, Qin Yu has already mastered the control of his emotions and strength, and it is time to learn more powerful tricks. Then, Dumbledore sighed slightly, made a face, and continued. Actually, I don't know what I want you to do specifically. Maybe I just feel a little powerless and want you to share the burden. It's strange to say. After telling you this, I feel much better and not so stressed anymore. Oh, you are less stressed, and I am more stressed. Qin Yu lamented in his heart and complained secretly. That night, Dumbledore actually just gave Qin Yu a wand, talked about the current situation, and encouraged him to unite the children and let them grow up quickly. As for the specific arrangements, Lao Deng didn't say anything because he didn't know it himself. The old and the young drank tea and chatted for some time, then ended the conversation that was later speculated and given a legendary tone by many people. After that, Qin Yu left the principal's office and walked downstairs. And just after he walked a few steps, he felt a rapid vibration in his waist. It was an alchemy artifact he carried with him, and there was a whistle that came from the same source and resonated with the alchemy artifact. The whistle hung around Hermione's neck. Chapter 111. Qin Yu took off the gold chain object from his waist, but it was a hollow bell, slightly smaller than a table tennis ball. The special thing about this bell is that there are no balls inside. However, even if there is no hitting ball, the bell can keep buzzing at this time, as if it is being hit by some force inside. The sound of the bell means that the whistle of the same origin has been blown. The whistle and the bell were originally prepared by Qin Yu to prevent Hermione from getting lost in the castle. Since giving her the whistle, Hermione has only blown it twice, but those 2 times were during the day, and as the girl got familiar with Hogwarts under the guidance of Qin Yu, she even went there occasionally in some secluded corridors and other places. The possibility of getting lost is unlikely. But now it was midnight, and the whistle suddenly sounded. Thinking about the time now, their tracking plan tonight, and the low possibility of Hermione getting lost, Qin Yu quickly came to a conclusion. This girl is in danger. His thoughts were spinning, and he couldn't help but stop. This was the whistle's first real warning, and the first thing he had to do was quickly know where Hermione was. Thinking of this, Qin Yu closed his eyes and felt it carefully. Of course, it is definitely not some kind of spiritual consciousness released to the outside world. This is not a world where mortals practice immortality, but a magical world. Divine consciousness does not exist. At least he has not cultivated it to the level of divine consciousness radar. The purpose of closing his eyes was to feel the collision direction of the bell in his hand, and through this direction he could roughly determine the position of the whistle. As a result, the bell in his hand kept hitting and shaking downwards. Think about it, the place where Malfoy and Harry agreed to duel was the trophy display room on the 4th floor of the castle, right below him. Based on this information, Qin Yu quickly located Hermione's most likely location, which was on the 4th floor of the castle. All kinds of thoughts flashed by in an instant. After quickly determining the target, Qin Yu quickly went downstairs. He didn't think anything too dangerous would happen. After all, Principal Dumbledore's office was on the 8th floor. If something serious happened, Qin Yu believed that Lao Deng would not sit idly by if he was so close. Of course, even if he knew this was the case, he would inevitably be worried. He walked quickly, jumped down from the stairs, and soon reached the corridor on the 4th floor. Qin. Hermione's voice came from the dimly lit corridor. She didn't expect that as soon as she blew the whistle, Qin Yu would arrive here in just a short time, which surprised her more or less. Qin Yu also heard the tone in Hermione's words and knew that there should be no danger. However, his steps still did not slow down and even accelerated a little. When he held that familiar little hand in his hand, he felt completely at ease. Be practical. What happened? Are you okay? Qin Yu asked, holding the girl's hand. It's okay now. We just had a close call. We met a big dog. No, there were 3. No, it wasn't 3. It should be 1 with 3. I think I've seen a big dog in a book. It's a 3-headed dog. Probably because Qin Yu finally let go of her nervousness and fear after arriving, Hermione kept talking to him with her little face raised. What happened just now? While Qin Yu was telling her story, he looked at her carefully to make sure that her face, arms, and legs were not injured by the 3-headed dog. Hermione moved her neck a few times in response so that he could see more fully. Then, the little girl frowned and said in confusion, It's strange to say that the big dog was yelling at us fiercely just now, but then one of its heads came closer and sniffed me, and then it calmed down. After saying this, she continued with lingering fear. At that time, the dog's head was less than 2 feet away from me. I could clearly see its wet nose and drooling mouth. I was scared. My legs were a little weak. Later, seeing that it relaxed its vigilance, we ran out, and then I blew the whistle, and you came not long after. I didn't expect it to come so fast. Looking at the girl who was smiling at the last word, Qin Yu couldn't help but reach out and pinch her cheek, and said angrily, I sent you a letter before and asked you to stay in the dormitory. Why do you have to follow me? Hermione knew that he was really angry this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't have felt the pain. After all, she had only been pinched lightly before. Ouch, it hurts. Qin, I know I was wrong. The little girl quickly cried out in pain and quickly admitted her mistake. Qin Yu only used 1 point of strength, but she screamed out 12 points of pain. Seeing her like this, Qin Yu couldn't bear to blame her too much, so he sighed and said, Fortunately, the 3-headed dog didn't attack you. If it becomes ferocious, you will inevitably be injured or even eaten. At that time, it was too late to say anything. Hermione nodded repeatedly, not daring to say anything for fear of offending the angry Qin again. The 3-headed dog, if nothing else, is the big dog named Lu Wei raised by Hagrid. Qin Yu has only seen Qin Yu a few times. However, Hagrid has trained the big dog to remember that he has the smell of the Weasley twins. In this way, they will not be disturbed when feeding or approaching the dog. Attacked. As for Hermione, probably because she stayed with Qin Yu all day long and had his scent on her body, Lu Wei, the 3-headed dog, mistakenly thought that this little girl was Qin Yu. Only then did she change her mind after getting close to Hermione and smelling it. Gotta quiet down. After thinking about this, Qin Yu noticed the other children. In addition to Harry and Ron, a pair of inseparable guys, there was also Adam, who was short of sleep and stayed up late at night. What surprised Qin Yu even more was that Neville, who had always been dull, was also shrinking among them. Finally, he looked frightened. Seeing Qin Yu looking at them, Harry and Ron naturally lowered their heads and felt uneasy. Adam yawned, obviously feeling sleepy again, and Neville's mouth was open, full of grievances. He was probably still a little confused. Tell me, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, what was the result of today's duel? Who won and who lost? Qin Yu teased the 2 troublemakers in a strange way. Malfoy wasn't even here. Harry whispered like a mosquito. What did you say? I didn't hear clearly. Qin Yu rolled his eyes. Malfoy lied to us and didn't come at all. He's just a liar. Harry raised his head and said angrily. Yes, not only did he not come, he might have even notified the administrator in advance to come here to catch us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have hidden in the room with the big dog. Ron said boldly. The thing was very simple. Malfoy asked Harry for a duel in the middle of the night, but he didn't come. Instead, he reported to the administrator of Hogwarts. Not long after they arrived, they were chased by the administrator of the Night Watch, and they entered by mistake. The one with the big dogs. Seeing the angry expressions of the 2 of them, Qin Yu was actually happy and said with a smile, Oh, someone else calculated it so easily. I don't know how you can still have the nerve to blame someone else for being too cunning. As soon as these words were spoken, Harry and Ron's heads that had just been raised lowered again. They were indeed careless this time and did not expect to fall into such a simple trap as Malfoy's. Okay, don't be stunned. Go back to sleep. If you have anything else, we'll talk about it tomorrow. After Qin Yu said this, he pulled Hermione and turned around to leave. The other 4 children quickly followed. After chatting briefly along the way, Qin Yu realized that Adam got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and happened to see Harry and Ron going out, so he followed them out of curiosity. As for Neville, he was injured during the flying lesson during the day and went to the infirmary to recuperate. He wanted to go back to the dormitory to sleep in the middle of the night. Unexpectedly, he got lost. He met Harry and his party who were going to duel, so they got together. After all, he was already in the castle. I've been wandering around like a fly for more than an hour. In short, when Qin Yu was invited to drink tea by Lao Dang, several children experienced a somewhat chaotic encounter and finally returned to the Gryffindor dormitory area under the leadership of Qin Yu. Everyone go back to your room and sleep. Stop messing around, Qin Yu said to several people. Several children responded one after another and dispersed. After everyone else left, Qin Yu and Hermione were left in the public rest area. The moon was shining like water, and in the dead of night, the 2 of them just stayed in the empty rest area. Qin, this time Hermione looked at him, bit her lip lightly, and said aggrievedly. But before she finished speaking, she was held in Qin Yu's arms. From the original gentle hug, it became tighter and tighter. She truly felt the care and worry conveyed by him. Since we already know each other's inner thoughts, there is no need to say too many words. Hermione hugged Qin Yu tightly with her arms, rubbed her little face against his chest like a kitten, and smelled the familiar smell with her nose. The smell made her feel at ease and warm, and it also brought a bit of joy to her heart. At this time, her heart, which had been frightened all night, finally calmed down. Chapter 112. Regarding the discovery of the three-headed dog on the fourth floor of the castle, Qin Yu certainly knew what was going on. It should have been something Dumbledore borrowed from Hagrid to act as a guard in order to protect the Philosopher's Stone. The place where the Philosopher's Stone was before was the underground vault number 713 of Gringotts in Diagon Alley. It was Qin Yu who accompanied Hagrid to retrieve it during the summer vacation. Harry Potter was also with him at the time. When he was taking it, Qin Yu revealed the secret of the magic stone, which triggered time regression. At that time, he made a lot of troubles and attempts to study this mechanism. In Qin Yu's view, the three-headed dog was certainly not enough to protect the magical stone. After all, this dog could not compare to the fire dragon underground in Gringotts. However, who told the Sorcerer's Stone to be stored on the fourth floor of the castle? That place was just downstairs from Dumbledore's office. And Dumbledore is the most powerful guarantee for the Sorcerer's Stone. If someone really dares to steal something under the nose of the greatest white wizard in the world, then he really has to weigh whether he has enough weight. I'm afraid Lauding is not fishing with the magic stone. What a good fishing law enforcement. After sorting out these things, Qin Yu lay on the bed and gradually fell asleep. While half asleep, he recalled what Dumbledore had said to him. Old Ding told him that the current situation was very worrying and asked him to unite the children at Hogwarts. However, it is obvious that this is not an easy task. For example, Qin Yu has a way to defeat Jerome and his group this year, and they basically have no temper. But if those young children in the next class still use this method, it may be difficult for Hogwarts to achieve the so-called combat effectiveness. They will all succumb to his lust, and there will be no personality and courage to speak of. So he had to think of a way to allow those children to compete and grow. This is a bit difficult to handle. These seem to be things that a teacher should consider, but Dumbledore put the burden on Qin Yu through some understatement. Even though Lauding said that he did not ask Qin Yu to bear anything, there was some meaning of entrusting an orphan in his words. Of course, he does not rule out that he is a casual move of this old fox. After all, Qin Yu has reason to suspect that Dumbledore has spent several years planning something, and with the talent and patience of an alchemist, Qin Yu the great magic stone that controls the world. Anyway, let me worry about doing the work without having to pay wages. This is probably Lao Deng's wishful thinking. With this thought in mind, Qin Yu fell asleep in a daze. The next day, the sun rose as usual, and Hogwarts was still as calm as a wise man, unhurried and unhurried. However, Malfoy felt a little surprised and agitated because he did not hear the news that Harry was punished. This annoying boy with a scar on his forehead was neither expelled from school nor received any other punishment. Showed up early in the morning to have breakfast in the auditorium as usual. This made Malfoy a little annoyed and hesitant, because he knew that the trap he set did not work. While he was disappointed, he was more or less worried about being retaliated against. He wasn't afraid of Harry, but he was afraid of the thigh Harry was holding, Qin Yu. At this moment, he became jealous of Harry Potter again, and felt infinite resentment and hatred towards Qin Yu. Of course, he did not dare to express this hatred. Also extremely annoyed was Harry Potter. He was sitting at the Gryffindor table, looking at Malfoy with eyes that seemed to be on fire. It was an angry flame. If eyes could cast a spell, this evil Malfoy would have been burnt bald by the fire, and his golden hair seemed to be covered with oil. Sooner or later, I will make Malfoy receive the lesson he deserves, Harry Potter said angrily, snorting. What happened yesterday really made him feel aggrieved. He found that he had put Malfoy in the column of the most hated people, along with his cousin Dudley. Qin Yu looked at Harry and then at Malfoy, who was sitting at the Slytherin table not far away. He felt as if countless lightning and fire were surging between the two of them. Well, the two little kids seemed to be at war with each other. However, Qin Yu noticed that after Malfoy noticed his gaze, his aura immediately weakened, and he lowered his head and stopped looking at Gryffindor. TSK, it seems that my weight is a bit too heavy. Qin Yu couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. If Harry and Malfoy were on the left and right ends of the scale, they might be able to maintain a dynamic balance of up and down. However, if Qin Yu stood on Harry's side, that end of the scale would fall directly. This was not in line with the competition and growth situation he had imagined last night. After all, Although Malfoy is a naughty kid, he still has good intentions. What he lacks is correct guidance. Qin Yu doesn't want to suppress this kid and turn him into a quail. Then Harry will probably lack some fighting spirit. What's too heavy? Hermione asked, confused, and put what she was eating on the plate. Qin Yu looked at her uneasy look and peeked at the food from time to time, knowing that this girl must have misunderstood something. So, he smiled and said, "It's definitely not that you are too heavy. Come on, try this. It tastes sweet and sour, very delicious. I still won't eat. I feel like my face has become rounder and rounder since school started." Hermione shook her head, pouting her little mouth and saying in distress, "Is there any?" "I didn't think so," Qin Yu said after looking at it carefully. "Why not? Look at me," Hermione said, pointing to her cheek. "Then let me give it a try." The girl looked so cute, Qin Yu couldn't resist pinching her. "Huh, what are you doing?" Hermione said, dissatisfied. "It feels good. It seems that it has indeed grown some flesh. I was in a hurry last night and didn't notice this," Qin Yu said seriously. You actually called me fat, just to see if I won't bite you." Hermione said this and immediately bit the hand that Qin Yu stretched out. "Hiss, it hurts." Qin Yu cried out in pain. "Humph." Hermione let go and snorted. "Well, no one thinks you are fat. Only when you eat more can you grow faster. Otherwise, I would be a head taller than you. Then don't eat so much until I catch up." "Okay, I'll wait for you." "Well, I'm thirsty. Have a glass of juice?" Qin Yu casually handed over a glass of juice. "Does your hand hurt?" "It hurts. It hurts." "Then, let me use a healing spell on you." "No, just blow it for me. The effect last time was pretty good." "Last time?" "Well, last time it seemed that he was in the public rest area. In order to make the treatment effect better, I even kissed him on the face." Hermione thought about this and quickly lowered her head to drink the juice one sip after another, pretending to be nonchalant, but her face turned red little by little. The two made some childish remarks, and Hermione returned to her snack food nature and continued to eat the delicious food. Qin Yu also quickly finished his breakfast. Then, everyone left the auditorium and walked to their respective classrooms. Hermione is going to take the charms class, while Qin Yu is taking the history of magic class. While Professor Binns, the history of magic teacher, was floating in the air, talking about the boring war between wizards and goblins in a rigid tone, Qin Yu was holding his head with one hand, in a state of distraction. He was thinking about how he could help Malfoy to strengthen himself so that the boy would have the courage to continue confronting Harry. Of course, if he was asked to publicly support Malfoy, Qin Yu would definitely not be able to do it, and he still didn't want to see Malfoy's tail raised. This matter is not easy to handle, Qin Yu thought to himself. Forget it, don't think about it now. Putting these distressing thoughts aside for the time being, he recalled the topic he had talked with Hermione in the morning and couldn't help but imagine the girl turning into a fat girl. Haha, that's like changing a person. Wait, he's a different person. Qin Yu muttered this sentence, frowning slightly, then relaxed, and an idea arose in his heart. What I was worrying about just now actually inspired this girl. Well, I have to say that it is beneficial to think about her more when nothing happens. Someone came to this conclusion. Dimensional wall. Sorry, I've been a little stuck lately, and my life has been a bit messy, so my code has been wasted. Thank you all for your love, comments, reminders, and rewards. The little author is really grateful. Thank you to the readers for your generous reward. I didn't notice what type it was. I guess it was certified by a master. I haven't dared to look at the back end recently, and I only noticed it now. Thank you for your support. Chapter 113. Draco Malfoy, the only son of the Malfoy family of pure-blood wizards. As one of the 28 holy families, the Malfoy family has a long history and infinite glory. As a member of the Malfoy family and the only future heir of the family, Draco also has a natural sense of pride and honor. Therefore, in the past 11 years, he has lived with great pride like a proud man of heaven. Although sometimes he feels very tired and feels a lot of pressure on himself, but he understands that this is all his fault. Should bear it. If you want to wear a crown, you must bear its weight. If you want to hold a rose, you must bear its wounds. He understands this truth and is willing to sacrifice for the glory of his family. Until this summer, I met two people in the robe shop in Diagon Alley, first a quiet boy with black hair and glasses, and then a slightly older Oriental boy with the same black hair but who looked very powerful. On that day, he found that his pride and glory were despised for the first time. To despise him is to despise the Malfoy family. This is something that absolutely cannot be tolerated. Then, On the first day of school, on the Hogwarts Express, he sincerely went to make friends with the legendary Harry Potter, only to find that this man was the quiet boy he met in the robe shop. That time, he was despised again, and he was looked down upon in front of the ridiculous Ron Weasley. And as we all know, the Weasley family is a joke among pure-blood wizarding families, and they are poor paupers. All these things made him feel insulted like never before. After school started, he tried to fight back and retaliate, but found that Harry Potter was always hiding next to Qin, and Qin was a person that he could not surpass and shake for a while, because this guy didn't know how to use it. Gained support from many teachers including Professor Snape and Professor McGonagall. The most important thing is that this rude guy Qin has a bad temper and likes to bully the weak. He is simply a bully who persecutes good students at Hogwarts. Yes, Qin is a complete bully. He will definitely become a scum among wizards when he grows up. Draco believed this. Then, yesterday in the flying class, he just picked up the memory ball from the idiot Neville, and that damn Harry shouted, "Hand over the ball," as if the ball belonged to him. Why should I give him the ball? Why should he ask me to listen to him? This damn arrogant Harry Potter. Even thinking about it now, Draco Malfoy had uncontrollable anger in his chest, and he was so angry that his brain ached. Later, he and Harry rode broomsticks in the sky to snatch the memory ball. I have to admit, this kid has two brushes. Before I came to Hogwarts, I had specially practiced flying, but I was still chased closely by him. Fortunately, I suddenly thought of it and threw the broken ball. Draco thought proudly to himself while recalling Harry's actions at that time. Although the kid successfully grabbed the ball, he was caught by Professor McGonagall and was called away. From Draco's point of view, it was inevitable that Harry's points would be deducted from Gryffindor because of his wanton behavior and blatant violation of school rules. Later, he set a trap for him, deliberately angered him, and arranged a duel at midnight. However, I notified the administrator in advance through a secret method and asked the administrator to arrest the person at that time. All of this was planned very carefully and seamlessly. But why is this boy Harry still fine? Do the teachers at Hogwarts just protect a student who has repeatedly violated school rules and regulations? This is so unfair. The angry Draco said these words bitterly through his teeth, full of resentment. What's unfair? Gore asked in a loud voice. At this time, the morning class had ended, and the three of them had just finished lunch in the auditorium. Goyle and Crabbe each held a pile of food, looking satisfied. Draco looked at Goyle's stupid and blank expression, couldn't help but glared at him, and said angrily, "Nothing. Eat your bread." After saying this, Draco left without looking back and walked towards Slytherin's dormitory area. He really didn't want to see this idiot follower who couldn't help but only knew how to eat. Did I do something wrong? Goyle turned to look at Crabbe, who was also a follower. Crabbe shook his head and said, "I don't know either. I must have done something wrong, otherwise he wouldn't be so angry." Gower murmured. Then, he quickly ate the croissant in his hand, and Crabbe caught up with Draco who had already walked away. After lunch, there will be some free time, nap, or whatever you want. Draco was not in the mood to play around. He just wanted to go back to the dormitory for a while. Of course, he would not admit that he was afraid of having more contact with Harry and Qin's gang to avoid being retaliated against. He was just a little tired. Well, that's right, he was just tired. The spells class in the morning was too exhausting, so he wanted to go back and take a rest. However, the clenched hands showed that he did not agree with this view in his heart, and he was just a little scared. I, the heir to the majestic Malfoy family, the descendant of the purest wizarding family in the wizarding world, the younger generation of talented wizards, why do I have to suffer such humiliation? Draco shouted in his heart. Then, a self-deprecating smile appeared on his lips. He didn't expect that less than a month after arriving at Hogwarts, he would encounter this series of things that made him suffer internally. But what can he do? He could only endure it all silently. With such a humiliating understanding, Draco walked step by step towards Slytherin's dormitory. The sunshine in the autumn afternoon was warm, but he found it irritating. Unconsciously, Draco turned into a deserted corridor. Because he didn't want to meet other people, he subconsciously chose a place less traveled by. Just when he was about one-third of the way down the corridor, a strong wind suddenly rose from the courtyard and blew toward the corridor. For a moment, there was flying sand and rocks and strong winds. Draco's face was painfully hit by gravel and the like. He quickly raised his arms and covered his head and face with the wide sleeves of his robe. However, this strong wind came suddenly and went away quickly. In just a moment, it calmed down. Draco lowered the sleeves that covered his face, revealing his blank eyes. Then, He looked around and couldn't figure out what this strange wind was about. It's really unlucky. How can anything happen to me? Draco was complaining more and more irritably when he suddenly lowered his head and saw a pile of fallen leaves on the ground and was stunned. The fallen leaves themselves are not unusual, but the pile of fallen leaves at this time is clearly arranged into letters. And these fallen leaf letters are combined in a certain order to form a dazzling word. C-O-W-A-R-D, coward. A flush of excitement instantly appeared on the boy's pale face, a sign of extreme anger, because the word coward was exactly what he was trying to avoid but had to admit. Yes, he thought he was a coward from the bottom of his heart. Now, having this word clearly put in front of him, Draco was extremely embarrassed and angry. Chapter 114. I'm not a coward. I'm not. Looking at the word made of fallen leaves on the ground, Draco rubbed his neck and shouted loudly. The red face and angry shouting made the expression of this proud man of heaven look a bit ferocious at this time, and the humiliating look flashing in his eyes made his ferocious look a little pitiful. Who is it? Who is playing tricks on me? Draco said this angrily, took out the delicate wand from the inner pocket of his robe, and then waved it around, casting any spell he could think of. He felt that someone must be hiding nearby to watch his joke. However, no matter how much wind, fire, thunder, and lightning brought by those spells were running around in the corridor, they could not force the pretender out. In addition to bringing a mess to this corridor. Why? Why do everyone bully me? Draco waved his wand wildly and kept shouting accusations. As he shouted, his voice became hoarse, his nose became sore, his eyes became red, and tears flowed from his eyes, sliding down his pale and flushed cheeks. He finally broke down emotionally and started crying. Woo, why? I am Draco Malfoy. I should be the pride of Hogwarts. Woo-woo. I am not a coward. They bullied me. It's the bad people. They bullied me. No matter how proud he is only an 11-year-old child after all. After the long-term mental oppression of the big devil Qin and the failure of yesterday's plan, he was already worried and uneasy. He was afraid of being retaliated, and even the auditorium was full of fear. Don't dare to stay too long. Now that a mysterious person had exposed his inner pretense, he collapsed completely, just like an ordinary child, venting his panic and grievances in a child's way. Draco Malfoy felt extremely vulnerable at this moment. It turns out that I am really a worthless coward, a mediocre coward, a waste who only knows how to cry but can do nothing. After a long time, Draco put down his wand and stopped casting spells and shouting. The corridor became quiet again. He leaned his back against a pillar and sat slumped on the ground, his face still stained with undried tears, and his silver-gray eyes stared blankly at the empty corridor. Maybe it's good to be a waste. Draco's lips twisted into a sad smile. He fell to the ground and babbled a bunch of words like complaints. Are you still there? If you want to humiliate me, feel free to humiliate me. I know I can't beat you. I can't even find you. I hate this place. I hate Hogwarts. I hate Harry Potter. I hate Qin. I hate everyone. I want to leave here. I want to go to another school. I never want to see these people again. However, no one responded to him. Only the occasional breeze blowing through the corridor, blowing on his forehead covered by messy golden hair. I'm probably leaving. Hee. How can a coward like me deserve other people's attention? Draco laughed at himself again, raised his thin chin, looked up at the sky. His eyes were dull and empty. Sha. Just when Draco thought that the mysterious man had left after humiliating him, there was a small friction sound on the ground. He frowned and looked at the source of the sound, and found that it was coming from a pile of leaves moving on the ground. And those leaves, like flexible swimming fish, quickly formed new letters, and these letters formed new words. That person hasn't left yet. Draco looked at the new words on the ground. Apparently, the mysterious man had written a new message for him. Have you cried enough? Draco wiped the tears on his face carelessly, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond to such a simple question, because his heart was full of grievances and embarrassment at this time. The mysterious figure didn't seem to be expecting Draco's answer. He continued to use the rustling leaves to form new words and form a new sentence. There is no shame in crying when you are young. It is better than regretting when you grow up. Draco looked at this sentence and didn't understand what it meant, but he felt it had a profound meaning. Moreover, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but he saw an emotion similar to care in this sentence. Is this person trying to comfort me? Draco thought to himself. You feel like your pride and self-esteem are gone, right? Do I still have it? Seeing this, Draco subconsciously replied, while his eyes dimmed again. You should ask, have you ever had true pride and self-respect? What do you mean? Don't I even deserve to be proud? Draco felt that he might have been delusional just now, and that this person was not here to comfort him. What you call pride comes from the long-standing family called Malfoy, from the so-called pure blood, and these flashy things are not really something to be proud of. Because this sentence has too many words, it is divided into 4 paragraphs, just like movie subtitles. After one paragraph is put out, it is immediately replaced by the next paragraph. Therefore, the rustling sound of moving leaves lasted for a long time. Draco also finished reading this long message amidst the rustling sound, and then, a blank look appeared in his eyes. Because the family's glory and pure wizard bloodline were originally the source of his pride, but now they are said to be flashy things. You're talking nonsense. Draco retorted weakly. He meant to say that this person was talking nonsense, that family and bloodline were the real things to be proud of. However, when he thought about it, it seemed that Qin and Harry had never cared about these 2 things about him. You must have thought about it yourself. Neither Qin nor Harry Potter took your family and blood seriously. The mysterious man seemed to have read Draco's mind and wrote a new message, which surprised Draco. He knew that there was a magic spell called legilimency that could read the thoughts in other people's brains. Could this mysterious man also have a similar spell? These thoughts arose, and Draco's eyes became more frightened. Then what is true pride? He asked. True pride should come from yourself, not anything else. Myself? Draco looked thoughtful. That's right, I have no idea. Draco lowered his head. He wanted to say that he didn't know that he had anything to be proud of. Yes, compared with people like Qin, he felt from the bottom of his heart that he was completely humble and insignificant. What was there to be proud of? You think you are weak, right? The mysterious man seemed to have read through his mind. Draco nodded. Admitting that you are weak is the first step to pride. You have already taken the first step. This is another sentence that people seem to understand, but it is very meaningful. However, Draco's originally depressed heart was slightly touched. He seemed to understand something, but he couldn't tell what it was for a while. Admitting that you are weak is the first step to pride, Draco murmured and repeated. Yes, there is a proverb in the East. Knowing one's own shame is a kind of great courage. Eastern proverb. Draco felt that this Eastern proverb was indeed very wise. The proverb is not important. What is important is that you understand that admitting that you are weak is not a bad thing. Thank you. I seem to understand a little bit of what you mean. Draco thanked him sincerely. Regardless of whether this person was mocking him or not, he felt that he had gained something today. Like, the courage to admit that you are weak. Perhaps you may ask, what is the second step of pride? The leaves formed a new message. What is it? Draco asked subconsciously. It's strength, it's strength. It's you who becomes stronger. It's you who have the power to defeat others. Draco's eyes widened, and his expression became intense. What does this person mean? Why did he say these things to me? Could it be that he... So, kid, do you want to have the power to become stronger? Draco looked at this sentence, and the excitement and ecstasy in his heart could not be increased. Eat slowly, Hermione reminded the voracious Qin, and then watched him eat a ham sandwich she handed over and lick the crumbs from his fingers. His next move made the little girl feel a little shy. Fortunately, no one around her seemed to notice this. This discovery made her feel a lot calmer. I'm so hungry. After Qin swallowed the food, he said with a little satisfaction, as if he had finally calmed down. What on earth did you do? Are you so tired in such a short time? Hermione asked curiously. Qin was having lunch just now, and suddenly said he had something to go out for. When he came back after a while, he looked starving. How should I put it? Well, I just put on a vest and opened a trumpet account. You have to know that opening a trumpet account is very tiring. Qin Yu pondered for a moment and said seriously, What nonsense are you talking about again? Of course, Hermione knew that this guy often said some strange things, but she was not surprised. I want to eat that. Qin Yu pointed at a certain food. Seeing how hungry he was, Hermione stopped asking questions, picked up the food and handed it over. Qin Yu swallowed it in 2 or 3 mouthfuls. Then, just as he was about to habitually lick the little hand with only the remains of food in it to avoid wasting food, however, the little hand retracted with a swish. Then, Qin Yu saw the owner of the little hand looking at him proudly. That probably means, I didn't succeed this time. Qin Yu raised his eyebrows. Well, I'm still a little hungry. In order to guide, a certain naughty kid, not only did I use a high-level phantom spell to make myself invisible, but I also had to dodge the various magic spells that kid threw randomly. It took a lot of effort. It was really difficult for Qin Penghu to move those leaves to send a message. So, he ordered another food, and the girl handed it over as he was told. This time, he didn't let the girl be proud. He swallowed the finger that was stretched out with quick eyes and mouth, and bit it lightly as punishment. Hermione blushed, looked at him angrily, and snorted. We'll see, the little girl whispered viciously. Dimensional wall. For the sake of connection, Draco's description is a little too much. He is not very good at describing intense emotions, so he can only write it like this. Without further ado, summer vacation is over, and everyone has a happy start to school. Chapter 115. It has been more than a year since Qin Yu came to this world. As time went by, especially after entering Hogwarts, his abilities continued to increase. Among them, he can naturally complete the learning goals excellently in the school's regular courses such as charms, transfiguration, and potions, far exceeding his peers. In addition to these regular courses, he also received after-school tutoring from Professor Snape and Professor Swinton, and his practical ability improved by leaps and bounds. After all, Professor Snape was really capable of doing things, sometimes even to the point of death, who let Qin Yu occasionally have convulsions, itchy skin, and mouth irritation. And Qin Yu, who had lived under Professor Snape for more than half of the school year, received the legacy from Professor Swinton. It was a gift, that is, the gorgeous alchemy long sword. This sword is fully functional, it can breathe fire and freeze, it can protect against poison and become invisible, it can be large or small, it can be soft or hard, and most importantly, it can fly. With this sword, Qin Yu easily realized his dream of flying with a sword. Of course, as a sword or a weapon, one of the most important functions is attack power. Qin Yu took it with him and jumped into Slytherin's secret room, where he took the initiative to provoke the basilisk and cleared dungeons several times. Not only did he further hone his actual combat capabilities, but he also relied on exploiting loopholes in the system at critical moments, and earned a lot of rewards. Unfortunately, when he went to fight the basilisk a few times, the system ignored him. In addition to these abilities obtained through his own hard work and practice, Qin Yu also has several abilities that come from system rewards, such as the high-level phantom spell he obtained on Christmas. The illusion body spell, in short, is to confuse others by transforming oneself or the target object, and the high-level illusion body spell can achieve the effect of invisibility. It was through this magic spell, coupled with some auxiliary small spells, that Qin Yu was able to quietly appear in a certain corridor, showing Draco Malfoy a wave of elusive master style. I have to say that this operation was quite successful. Draco was stunned for a while, but it was not an easy thing. Using the high-level phantom spell itself was very energy-consuming, and Qin, it took a lot of effort for you to avoid the messy spells unleashed by the naughty boy when he was out of control. After all, it was difficult for him to use many of his abilities while invisible. Fortunately, with the previous actual battle with Professor Snape and the experience of challenging the basilisk to death, Qin Yu narrowly avoided those scurrying flames or water lines, leaving no trace and avoiding the vest falling off. The embarrassing situation of social death on the spot. But now that I think about it, what Qin Yu is most proud of is the thought of controlling the leaves to express that sentence. Who makes me not as awesome as Lao Deng? I can only choose this method, he thought helplessly in his heart. This method was of course inspired by Dumbledore's message transmission technique last night. However, old Deng could make handwriting appear out of thin air in front of Qin Yu, while Qin Yu could only control physical objects to place letters one by one. The gap was still quite large. Fortunately, the overall effect is good. Qin Yu has initially achieved his goal. It depends on how Draco behaves in the future. Well, this matter cannot be rushed. While eating and sorting out his thoughts, Qin Yu quickly finished lunch. Then, he helped Hermione clean her hands and took the girl back to the Gryffindor common room. Is there anything you don't understand about the magic class in the morning? Qin Yu asked on the way. Fortunately, what Professor Flitwick is talking about so far is quite simple. However, there is one part of what he said that I don't quite understand. After asking him, he said that he will talk about it later. Now it's not good to know too much. Hermione shrugged and said helplessly. So, you still want to figure out the questionable part? Qin Yu looked at her and asked with a smile. Hermione nodded, tilted her head and said, Yes, I want to understand. Didn't you say that you should leave no doubts when studying? This is your learning secret. Okay, I'll tell you when I get back. Looking at Hermione's cute and serious look, Qin Yu smiled, squeezed the soft little hand, couldn't help but rub it twice, and then, before the owner of the little hand could protest in embarrassment, he pulled her to speed up the pace and he said, "Time is limited. I will teach you quickly." The little girl could only trot along with him, and the shame and annoyance that had just arisen dissipated in the trot. Next, the two of them spent their lunch break studying. I have to say that tutoring Hermione is really easy and enjoyable. The little girl is very smart and can understand everything. She also studies very seriously. She can understand what Qin Yu said attentively, and sometimes she can draw inferences from one example. The most important thing is that from time to time, he will show surprise that that's it, or look at Qin Yu with stars in his eyes, full of admiration. Who can handle being looked at by such a cute girl? Fortunately, there were many people in the public rest area during lunch break. Otherwise, this girl might have suffered some dangers, such as having her face pinched or her head being rubbed. Seeing Qin Yu's occasional daze and regretful expression, the little girl couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She understood more or less what this guy was putting up with. After all, some of his habits were what she had learned when they were alone during the summer vacation. You will know when the time comes. And some of his habits, she was also somewhat used to. But there are too many people now. One last question. Hermione looked at the time. The lunch break was almost over, so she flipped through a page in the textbook and said seriously, "Well, what's the problem?" Qin Yu asked as he picked up the water glass on the table and took a sip. "Here, take a look." Hermione stretched out her finger and pointed at a place. Qin Yu then poked his head over, paused slightly, and read the above content. The key to casting this kind of magic spell is based on the different materials of the wand core, and then, as soon as he read the beginning, he felt something pecked his cheek. Class is about to start. I'll go back to the dormitory to get the afternoon textbooks. The girl who succeeded in her conspiracy dropped this sentence and disappeared before Qin Yu could react. I was taken advantage of again. I was so angry. Someone secretly thought in his heart. Did Malfoy take the wrong potion from Professor Snape? Ron whispered to Harry at the next table. At this time, they were taking a defense against the dark arts class, and Professor Quirrell's stumbling way of speaking made people distracted frequently. What happened to him? Harry didn't know what was going on. Didn't you notice? This guy has been giggling from time to time all afternoon. Look, he's laughing again. Isn't it weird? Ron said, pointing to Della not far away. Malfoy motioned for Harry to look at it, with a slightly horrified expression on his face. A person smiles inexplicably from time to time. In the eyes of others, it is indeed a somewhat disturbing thing. Harry followed the instructions and looked over, nodded and said, "That's true." He looked unhappy in the morning, but he often smiled in the afternoon. I didn't think so before, but now I hear you say this it does feel a bit weird, right? If he hadn't taken the wrong potion, he might have lost his mind. Ron guessed maliciously. He really hates Malfoy. Anyone who exposes his shortcomings passively or is scolded as a weakling will probably hate him. Haha. Harry couldn't help but chuckle. Purr, Mr. Potter and way, Mr. Weasley. Please maintain class discipline. Professor Quirrell said solemnly. Sorry, Professor Quirrell. We were wrong, Professor Quirrell. The two quickly bowed their heads and admitted their mistake. Okay, listen carefully, Professor Quirrell said, and then continued to explain with a lizard. When Harry and Ron raised their heads again, they happened to see Malfoy giving them a gloating smile. Harrow and the other two glared back at him, and the three of them looked at each other with murderous intent, making it difficult to tell who was superior and who was inferior. Then, Ron looked at Harry, made a gesture on his head, and muttered a word silently. Harry instantly judged from Ron's mouth shape that the word was, idiot. That means, this guy is out of his mind. That's why he giggled from time to time before. The two smiled again, but this time they were more restrained and did not make a sound, so as not to be scolded by Professor Quirrell again. On Malfoy's side, he saw the two of them laughing. Although he didn't know what they were laughing at, they were just instinctively unhappy. He snorted coldly and said viciously in his heart, "Wait and see, when I become stronger, I will make you look good." Thinking of the message from the mysterious man, Malfoy suddenly became happy and smiled again. This smile has appeared many times this afternoon, because he is full of ardent expectations and unlimited imagination for the future. Chapter 116. During dinner, Ron and Harry used Malfoy's giggle as a funny thing to tell everyone. George and Fred listened with great interest and couldn't help but look at the long Slytherin table. They spent a long time observing Malfoy and finally became convinced of what their brother and Harry said. On average, I laugh every 2 minutes, and there is no sign of it when you smile. The two brothers spoke to each other one by one. Yes, that's it. Ron nodded sharply. Yes, there is no warning. Harry nodded in agreement. Hermione rolled her eyes and said angrily, You two have had enough of staring at him all afternoon. Can't you do something else? Malfoy, well, he probably encountered something happy. Qin Yu made a casual analysis, then waved his hand and said, Okay, stop paying attention to others all day long. Do your own thing well, is the most important thing. That's right. You have already been scolded by Professor Quirrell once. Haven't you learned your lesson? The eldest sister had someone backing her up and raised a stern eyebrow. When Qin and Hermione said this, Harry and Ron shrank their necks, looked at each other, and made faces, and the topic was dropped. After all, no matter how annoying Malfoy is, it shouldn't be all of their lives. They still have many things worthy of care and attention. As a result, the content of the chat changed to something else. For example, Ron remembered that he had seen a trophy when he was rushing through the trophy room yesterday, and it said James Potter on it. Everyone present knew that this was the name of Harry's father. You will definitely become an excellent seeker because you have a father who is an excellent seeker, Ron said to Harry quite confidently. These words made the latter look a little complicated for a moment, because father was a longing and unfamiliar word to him. Now in this magic school where his parents once stayed, Harry suddenly heard something related to one of them. Harry felt excited, but also confused and sad. In short, it was difficult to describe the feeling to outsiders. I hope it's what you said, Harry muttered softly. Since you want to be an excellent seeker, you have to train hard. Quidditch can't be played just by talking about it, Qin Yu said, half admonishing and half changing the subject. Yeah, I'll try my best, Qin, Harry said immediately and solemnly. The little boy Harry would listen especially carefully to what Qin said, as if he regarded him as the most important teacher and role model. Seeing Harry's upright attitude, Qin Yu nodded slightly, and then, after thinking for a while, he added, You must be unable to keep up with the daily training of the college team. Senior Wood has arranged an urgent special training for you to help you quickly getting started. Will you teach me, Qin? Harry adjusted his glasses and said expectantly. With the help of his good friend Ron, Harry already had a more detailed understanding of Quidditch, and then had a clearer understanding of Qin's strength in this area. Needless to say, Qin is the best. It would be really great if I could get Qin's guidance. It depends. Maybe Wood and I will take turns teaching you. It mainly depends on which of us has free time, Qin Yu replied. Great, Harry said excitedly. He was already satisfied if Qin could teach him. As for whether he should take turns teaching with Captain Wood, he wouldn't ask for too much. In a good mood, Harry had a huge appetite, picked up a large plate full of food, and ate it heartily. Ron was quite envious of his friends and thought it would be great if he could join the Quidditch team. Unfortunately, he couldn't even ride a broomstick well, so joining the Quidditch team was probably a luxury. Thinking of this, Ron felt a little depressed. Then, when he raised his head, his eyes met Qin's eyes accidentally. Then, when he saw Qin Chong, he nodded slightly and said, When Senior Wood graduates, the Quidditch team will be short of a goalkeeper. If you are interested, you can prepare and wait for next year or the year after to join the team selection. Can I? Ron stuttered with excitement when he heard this. I'm just saying that if you want to participate, you can prepare. Qin Yu emphasized the meaning of his words. I understand. I will work hard to practice flying, Ron said with fighting spirit. Well, come on, Qin Yu encouraged. Thank you, Qin. Ron was in a better mood now. He put more food on the plate than Harry and ate with his mouth wider than Harry's. Seeing this scene, Qin Yu nodded slightly. I know how to coax children. Hermione leaned closer and whispered something in his ear. Qin Yu was amused and said angrily, Aren't you a child too? You still call others children. I'm not. Humph. Hermione retorted with a pout. Well, no, you are already a big kid. Qin Yu nodded perfunctorily. My lord. Hermione corrected dissatisfiedly, raising her chin slightly. Dear Miss Granger, only children long to be adults. After Qin Yu said this, he stuffed a piece of mousse cake into the girl's mouth to block her mouth. Eat more to grow up faster, Qin Yu added. So, Hermione could only puff up her cheeks and eat the food. The autumn night at Hogwarts is getting colder, and the castle shows its tall and dark silhouette in the scattered lights, just like it did thousands of years ago. In a dark corridor of the castle, a thin figure wearing a thick black cloak was walking cautiously, judging from his size. this person was more likely to be a first-year freshman. Judging from the direction, this figure is walking towards the outside of the castle. The quiet night and the empty campus made his move seem a bit sneaky, but it was obvious that he had a reason enough for him to be willing to risk violating the school rule of no night travel. At midnight, under the oak tree between the greenhouse and the vegetable patch, the figure murmured this sentence, and as he said this sentence, his eyes seemed to shine brightly in the night. Yes, this person is none other than Draco Malfoy, the first-year student of Slytherin House. But that sentence just now was what he saw in an adventure today. That must be a very powerful and mysterious person. Imagining the words and sentences that the pile of leaves produced at that time, Malfoy couldn't help but sigh in his heart again. Since the other party is a powerful and mysterious person, what is his purpose in looking for me? Will he become the chosen one just like the legend says? Thinking about various possibilities, Malfoy became more and more excited and his eyes became brighter. Dimensional wall. Hey, I haven't written in a long time. I almost forgot the plot. I took the time to read the previous ones. I don't know if anyone will read it, so I won't care. Let's just write it first. I still hope to finish this story. Chapter 117. A sneeze. A sneeze. A sneeze. A series of sneezes sounded in the dim morning mist outside the castle. Through the misty mist, the source of the sneezing sound can be distinguished under a tall oak tree. There sat a boy with blonde hair and pale skin. His originally beautiful gray eyes were now covered with bloodshot eyes, looking up at a 45-degree angle at the sky that had just shimmered. The dew wetted the hair on his forehead, indicating that he had been sitting here for a long time. Not far in front of him, there was a pile of large and small acorns. The round acorns were regularly arranged into 4 letters on the ground, from left to right. H, S, W, W. It is the abbreviation of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Apparently there weren't enough acorns to display the full spelling of the school's name, or the word Hogwarts. Of course, for a squirrel hiding nearby, this pile of acorns is considered rich and is already worth less than half of its winter storage granary. However, an uninvited guest came to this food gathering place that originally belonged to it tonight. After arriving, he stayed all night. This pile of acorns was the person's harvest for one night. The squirrel neither dared to fight for it or drive it away, but was reluctant to leave, so it could only follow it and watch it all night long. Stay away, this is not a place for you to play. A dull roar came from a distance. The squirrel that had been watching next to it all night suddenly became excited, turned its head and pricked up its ears to listen. Of course it cannot understand human language, but that does not prevent it from warning of danger. After standing frozen in place for a moment, the squirrel took a deep look at the pile of acorns again, then turned around and scurried into the bushes and soon disappeared. Also foreboding the danger was the boy sitting on the ground. His dazed expression was suddenly shattered, and he stood up from the ground in a hurry. He finally looked around aimlessly, as if expecting someone to appear, but after all he didn't see it, so he could only sigh and hurriedly left the oak tree. It was very close to the vegetable patch, and he didn't want to be regarded by Hagrid as a troublemaker who destroyed the vegetable plot. As the manager of the vegetable field, Hagrid must always be wary of students who are close to the vegetable field, such as the Weasley brothers. Of course, these two have become much more honest in the past year. The squirrels have gone, and so have the people, leaving a field of acorns in this place, waiting for their final destination. Qin Yu slept well at night. They even had a dream, the details of which are almost forgotten, but they knew it was a sweet dream because they vaguely remembered a brown-haired girl in the dream. The two of them also watched a movie about aliens about to invade the Earth, and the alien has the face of a cat owner. The dream was a bit messy, but very warm. When I woke up, it was a sunny day, and the sunlight shone through the windows of the castle into the dormitory, driving away the chill in the room and bringing a comfortable warmth. After saying hello to Elvis and the other 3 sleeping animals, Qin Yu left the dormitory. The brown-haired girl who met him in the public rest area held her hand just like in the dream, and talked about some topics that had no beginning or end as they walked. How is Crookshanks doing lately? Is he still not energetic? While chatting, Qin Yu thought of the cat-faced alien in his dream, and Qin Yu thought of Hermione's little yellow cat. It was probably due to acclimatization. Ever since the cat was brought to school, it has been a little sick and has stayed in the room all day without coming out to move around. Much better. If I had known better, I would have let him stay at home and wait until he is stronger before bringing him here, Hermione replied, with a little worry in her tone. Perhaps we can let him live with Hagrid for a while. You know, Hagrid is always very good at dealing with animals. Qin Yu thought for a while and said, "Before, I thought the kitten would adapt quickly, so Qin Yu didn't care too much. But now it seems that he still needs to find a professional to take a look." "Good idea. We'll take Crookshanks to Hagrid's cabin later." Hermione's eyes lit up after hearing this. Uncle Hagrid's affinity with animals was undeniable, and Hermione knew this. After making up their mind, the two went to the hall to have a hasty breakfast, then returned to Gryffindor Tower, took Crookshanks with them, and headed to Hagrid's cabin next to the Forbidden Forest. After leaving the castle and passing the greenhouse in charge of Professor Sprout, there was a relatively flat grassland with a tall oak tree growing on the grass. At this moment, Crookshanks, who was lying in Hermione's arms with squinted eyes, suddenly turned his head, raised his head, and looked forward. Qin Yu and Hermione followed the cat's gaze and immediately understood the reason for the cat's behavior. There was a little squirrel squatting with an acorn in his arms. The little squirrel also discovered the two people and the cat almost at the same time, and left in a hurry after being stunned for a moment. However, due to too much panic, the acorn it was holding fell to the ground. Is this squirrel about to turn into a goblin? It actually made 2 letters out of acorns? Hermione approached, looked at the ground, and said in a rather surprised tone, "The acorns on the ground formed 2 Ws. As for the concept of becoming a spirit, of course it was mentioned in the story Qin Yu once told her." Qin Yu looked at the pile of acorns, and then at the grass next to the acorns where someone had obviously been sitting. He twitched the corner of his mouth and showed an unintelligible smile, then nodded and said, "Well, probably he's a squirrel who loves to learn, and he doesn't forget to spell the letters when collecting food." "You're talking nonsense again." Hermione curled her lips, obviously not believing Qin Yu's statement, but she didn't know how to explain this strange phenomenon. Perhaps some bored Hogwarts student helped the squirrel. Qin Yu didn't argue about the matter. He leaned over and picked up an acorn and threw it to Crookshanks. The kitten got the round fruit and pawed at it curiously. The two of them didn't stop any longer and continued to look for Hagrid. When they arrived at the familiar wooden house, they met Uncle Hagrid. After Qin Yu explained his purpose, the uncle took the kitten over. The kitten was a little nervous at first, but soon became familiar with this giant human, and even used its paws to scratch his thick and messy beard. When Qin Yu and Hermione saw this scene, they looked at each other and thought at the same time, Hagrid is indeed very capable. Crookshanks probably isn't used to the environment of the castle. Let him live with me for a while. I will take good care of him. Hagrid saved Beard from the 2 cats' paws and smiled, said to Qin Yu and Hermione. "Thank you very much, Hagrid." Qin Yu responded. "Thank you, Hagrid," Hermione echoed. Then, Hagrid talked about his experience in getting along with animals, which is also his best field. Actually, for many animals, as long as you get along with them sincerely, you will gain their friendship. After talking a lot, Hagrid briefly summarized. Sincerity is important, but sometimes appropriate tough measures are still necessary. Qin Yu said with a shrug. Hearing this, Hagrid subconsciously looked in the direction of the Forbidden Forest. Thinking of his old friend the Acromantula, he couldn't help but cough dryly. Ahem, you can't say that. Anyway, first of all, we need to learn more about the different habits of different animals so that we can prescribe the right medicine. Qin Yu nodded and said, "Well, I agree with this point. For example, to deal with unruly eagles in the East, a method called stoking the eagle is used to prevent the eagle from sleeping, to temper the eagle's patience, and to their savage nature becomes tame. I've heard of this method, but it's still quite painful for the eagle." Hagrid expressed sympathy. A sword can only become sharp after being polished. Qin Yu shrugged again and said a famous Eastern poem. "Well, you are a long sword that is getting sharper and sharper." Hagrid obviously thought of Qin Yu's changes in the past year or so. Qin Yu smiled and said nothing, leaving the topic behind. Then, Hagrid got up to make tea and enthusiastically recommended the desserts he made. Hermione learned her lesson this time and only dared to eat after seeing Qin Yu eat the dessert, for fear of damaging her teeth. In this way, a leisurely morning was spent happily by the 3 of them drinking tea and chatting. Maybe because Uncle Hagrid is somewhat allergic to cats, he sneezed a few times while helping Crookshanks clean up the cat's nest. However, according to Hagrid, if the contact time is not long, there will be no problem, and cats like this creatures either sleep or play by themselves, and they are not very clingy. P.S. The plot requires that Hagrid's allergy to cats is downplayed here. The author himself is considered to be slightly allergic, but he helped a friend raise cats for a while, and it was not a big problem. Okay, I actually forgot about this. Chapter 118. The kitten Crookshanks was fostered with Hagrid, which made Qin Yu and Hermione feel more at ease. On the way back, I passed the tall oak tree again. The two letters W composed of acorns on the ground had been removed, leaving only fallen leaves on the ground. That squirrel is quite diligent, Qin Yu praised sincerely. Fortunately, we didn't scare it, otherwise it would be a shame if it left so many acorns alone, Hermione said with a relieved smile. Probably because of the pressure of life, I am not willing to give up so much food. After saying this, Qin Yu couldn't help but feel emotional. Think about your previous life. For a salary of several $1,000s, you voluntarily worked overtime until 8 or 9 every day. On weekends, you had to turn on your mobile phone and be on standby at any time. Isn't this good if you don't get involved, don't work overtime, and don't answer work calls on weekends? Could it be that you don't want to do this? It's not forced by life. Therefore, whether it is an animal or a human being, there are always things that they do not want to do but must do. Therefore, some flowers in the greenhouse still have to go through some wind and rain before they can understand the difficulty of being born as a human being and understand that some things are not so easy to obtain. Qin Yu thought this in his heart and glanced at the grassland where people had obviously been squatting for a long time and had now recovered a lot, feeling more and more at ease. Let's go. Lunchtime is almost here. He called to Hermione. The latter was picking up a round fruit that had just fallen from the tree, looked at the sun, put it into the pocket of his robe with great satisfaction, and then happily walked to school with Qin Yu. When Qin Yu was in the cabin before, he talked to Hagrid about Eagle Cookie because he thought of Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy is a naughty kid, there is no doubt about it. Now that he knew this, how could he let that kid easily obtain the so-called adventure? It would only make Malfoy even more bearish. As said before, Qin Yu didn't need Draco and Harry to become good friends who loved each other. At least, he didn't think about taking the initiative to bring them together to resolve their differences or anything like that. He just asked Draco to cheer up again to prevent the boy from becoming useless under the pressure from the outside world, mainly from Qin Yu himself. Thinking about it this way, it's not like being an eagle, but like being a parent raising a child. Not only afraid that the child will become a waste due to spoiling, but also afraid that the child will lose vitality due to too much pressure. Anyway, it's not easy. I'm so worried about Merlin's beard. Lucius should give me some nanny fees or tutoring fees or something. Thinking of this, Qin Yu couldn't help but complain secretly in his heart. At about this time, in the underground Slytherin rest area, in a first-year boys' dormitory, Crabbe and Goyle were happily talking about the upcoming lunch. As they talked, the two couldn't help but swallow their saliva several times. Draco, do you want to come together? Goyle asked the blond boy lying on the bed carefully. Malfoy was speechless and gave him a cold and fierce look. Feeling the eyes that seemed to release 2 green lights, Goyle and Crabbe shrank their necks at the same time and swallowed again. Then, the two of them smiled sarcastically and backed away slowly under the gaze of those 2 eyes. When they retreated to the door, they turned around and left quickly, not daring to stay any longer. Listening to the series of panicked footsteps gradually moving away, the coldness and ferocity in Malfoy's eyes gradually disappeared, turning into empty and blank again, looking completely powerless and wanting to do nothing. Why on earth? Why? Malfoy whispered over and over again. In the end, he couldn't resist the tiredness of a sleepless night, so he lay on his bed and fell asleep in a daze. I don't know how much time had passed, but when Goyle and Crabbe came back with a pile of muffins and croissants, they saw their boss sleeping, with a smile on his lips, as if he was having a beautiful dream. Saturday and Sunday, the 2-day weekend passed by in a hurry. Entering Monday, a new week of classes begins. In the classroom, the ghostly Professor Binns floats in midair, telling a certain period of history in an unchanging tone. Well, he's not a ghost, he's a ghost himself. Harry felt that the content of Professor Binns' lecture was not as attractive as himself. Harry thought about this and resisted the urge to fall asleep due to the boring history of magic class content. And when he subconsciously looked around, he found that Hermione was the one who listened most attentively. Just when Harry turned his gaze, the eldest sister even raised her hand to answer a question, but Harry Potter was confused and didn't understand this question at all. As for everyone else, like Harry, they were struggling on the edge between wakefulness and sleep, and had even begun to fall asleep, such as Ron. No, there is another person who is very energetic, but a little too mentally disturbed. This was what Harry added in his mind after seeing Malfoy not far away again. There's no way around it. Malfoy is really a bit strange lately. Unlike last Friday when he kept giggling, his whole person has been filled with an indescribable restlessness these past 2 days. Just like now, Malfoy clenched and unclenched his fists and looked straight at Professor Binns floating in the air. Of course, Harry knew that this guy was definitely not paying attention because his eyes were not focused on the professor at all. Anxiety, restlessness, longing, loss, confusion. His eyes are really complicated. Looking at the emotion in Malfoy's eyes and thinking about how bad-tempered he had been in the past few days that even Goyle and Crabbe avoided him, Harry felt that this guy might really have lost his mind. Just like Ron, that's what I said the other day. Thanks to the interest brought by observing Malfoy, Harry Potter actually resisted his sleepiness and did not doze off again until the end of Get Out of Class, becoming the third energetic person in this class. Okay, it's time for Get Out of Class to end. Let's go and enjoy dinner. After the professor said this, he floated straight to the blackboard, passed through it, and disappeared. The little magicians are already used to this. After the professor left, most of the people showed relaxed and cheerful smiles because they had finished the afternoon class, and they talked in twos and threes about what they would do in the next few days until curfew. Ron, wake up, wake up. Harry pushed Ron, who was still sleeping. %*S1** Harry, is it daylight yet? Ron raised his head, stretched and said vaguely while rubbing his eyes. Ha ha ha. The students around him burst into cheerful laughter. Harry curled his lips helplessly. He was somewhat used to Ron's behavior and didn't even bother to hide away to show that he wasn't familiar with him. After all, everyone knew that they were good friends, and it was impossible to distance themselves from each other even if they wanted to. Get out of class is over, we should go, Harry said hurriedly to Ron while packing his things. Then Harry looked in the direction of Malfoy, thinking that this guy would take the opportunity to taunt Ron with something like making a fool of himself again. Unexpectedly, Malfoy just cast an indifferent and bored look, and then walked out of the classroom without looking back. What happened to him? Who messed with him again? Ron looked at Harry and said blankly, "Who knows?" Harry originally wanted to say that Malfoy might be really out of his mind, but he thought of what Qin Yu said before. The most important thing is not to always pay attention to others and do your own thing well. So he swallowed the second half of the sentence. I paid attention to him because I was really sleepy in class, so I just used it to refresh myself, Harry added in his mind. While they were talking, the two of them had packed up their things and left together to have dinner in the hall that also functions as a canteen. Elvis, hasn't Qin come yet? After Hermione asked this question, she stretched her neck and looked behind Elvis, but she did not see that familiar figure. Elvis had just walked over and was muttering about the growth habits of a certain herb in a low voice. His thoughts were interrupted by Hermione's question. After being stunned for a moment, he suddenly said, "Sorry, Hermione, I almost forgot to tell you. Qin let me tell you that he has something to do with Hagrid and will meet you after dinner." "When to Hagrid's place? What a do?" Hermione thought to herself. "Oh, okay." The little girl shrugged and said in a very calm tone. Chapter 119. At the same time, in Hagrid's wooden house, Qin Yu had taken off his wizard robe, put on a large black cloth scarf, and was busy. The black cloth napkin looked like Hagrid's large cloth napkin, but at this time it was stained with water mixed with white flour, making it look like an abstract oil painting. However, Hagrid didn't pay too much attention to this because he was more concerned about the food Qin was making. According to Qin, this food is called birthday noodles. As the name suggests, it is a special kind of noodles eaten on birthdays. It is a unique Oriental birthday food with a blessing meaning. The giant uncle who always boasted that he was very passionate about making food would not let go of this opportunity to learn. He sat behind Qin Yu with his hands down and stared at his movements intently. Qin Yu just opened the lid of a pot and checked the chicken soup simmering in the iron pot. Then he returned to the chopping board and began to mix the dough. In a small garden, dig and dig, plant small seeds and bloom small flowers. In a big garden, as he added water to knead the flour, he hummed softly, and his hands moved back and forth in the flour pile, as if following the casting trajectory of a certain spell, which actually matched the lyrics. Hagrid naturally couldn't understand the Eastern language Qin Yu hummed, but that didn't stop him from knowing that the melody of the song was very brisk and had the feel of a nursery rhyme. Of course, his focus is still on the food itself. He watched Qin Yu roll the kneaded dough into a large irregular dough, then rolled the dough up, cut it into thin noodles with a horizontal knife, and then put the cut noodles into the already prepared noodles. In the boiling hot water pot, this pot is not the same as the one that boils the chicken soup. The chicken soup has been put aside by Qin Yu. 5 minutes should be enough. Qin Yu glanced at the magic wall clock in Hagrid's house and murmured. So, Hagrid and Qin Yu waited eagerly for 5 minutes. During this period, Qin Yu added water to the boiling pot several times and stirred it from time to time. 5 minutes is not long, nor is it short. It mainly depends on who is staring at the minute and second hands. As Qin Yu shouted, "Out of the pot!" Hagrid subconsciously looked at his own that huge black glazed pottery bowl. However, Qin Yu took the noodles into a basin and soaked them in cold water. This somewhat disappointed Hagrid, and once again confused him about the purpose of Qin's operation. However, how could Qin Yu care about the psychological activities of Uncle Hagrid, a bystander? Instead, he continued to work on his own, boiling the chicken soup again. After the chicken soup boiled for 7 or 8 minutes, he added an appropriate amount of seasonings and tasted it. After tasting the saltiness and feeling satisfied, I turned off the fire. Merlin's beard. It reminds me of potions class. It's like the nightmare of the past suddenly came back. Hagrid couldn't help but muttered in a low voice, shocked by the cumbersome production process. However, his mood soon cheered up because he saw Qin Yu placing 2 bowls, including his big black bowl. Finally, we can eat. Hagrid couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. Sure enough, Qin Yu then used a pair of long wooden chopsticks to scoop the noodles soaked in cold water into 2 bowls, one large and one small. After the noodles were put into the bowl, Qin Yu added some shredded vegetables and egg skins that had been cut in advance, green cucumbers, red carrots, yellow eggs. They were colorful. Put a spoon into the pot, scoop up the hot chicken soup, and pour it into the noodle bowl. In an instant, the fresh aroma of the chicken soup mixes with the wheat aroma of the noodles, creating a more complex aroma that is irresistible. Gulu. As expected, Hagrid swallowed again. The sound was surprisingly loud. 3 minutes later, like a storm, Hagrid finished the noodles and drank the last mouthful of soup in the bowl. How do you think it tastes? Qin Yu put down his chopsticks and asked seriously. He had just eaten half a bowl. Of course, his speed couldn't be compared to Hagrid's. Although Qin Yu thinks that his cooking is just okay, he still feels that he should listen to the comments of others, especially those who are used to eating Western food. Hearing this, Hagrid nodded simply and said, "It's delicious. The noodles are soft and smooth, and the soup is also very delicious. Well, in short, it's special, delicious." Uncle Hagrid originally wanted to use more words to describe this special delicacy, but after thinking for a long time, he could only think of the word delicious. However, Qin Yu had already understood what he meant, and nodded and said, "That's good. No ingredients were wasted. The most important ingredient of this birthday noodles is not the noodles, but the chicken soup. To be precise, it is the herbs and mushrooms used to cook the chicken soup. These things cost him a lot of gold galleons." It was he who recently commissioned Hagrid to go to Diagonal Bot from Lane. Thanks to his general understanding of the cooking methods of Eastern cuisine, combined with the knowledge of herbal medicine and potions he has learned in the past year or so, the chicken soup finally cooked can be said to be innovative, and it also has certain potion effects. Of course, the main purpose is still taste. Judging from Hagrid's feedback, Qin Yu's goal was basically achieved. I will adjust the proportion of ingredients to try to retain the original flavor of the chicken soup. Qin Yu made the decision to conduct further experiments with his consistent research attitude. "No problem. You can use what I have here as you like." How could Hagrid have any objection? He was in favor of it with both hands. "After all, I am quite satisfied with this kind of delicacy, and I don't mind being a test mouse and eating it a few more times." There was still some noodles left in the basin, and Hagrid couldn't wait for Qin Yu to serve it to him. So he stood up on his own initiative and scooped the noodles into the bowl with a fork. "Don't worry about me. You can eat the rest." Qin Yu looked at Hagrid's slightly hesitant action of fishing out the noodles and said very understandingly. Hagrid smiled and happily scooped up the noodles. Following Qin Yu's instructions just now, he put in some side dishes and also deliberately added some of his favorite onions. Finally, there was chicken soup. A few spoons of chicken soup was put into the bowl, injecting soul into this bowl of noodles. After stirring evenly, Hagrid rolled up a large lump of noodles with his fork and stuffed it into his mouth. Suck, suck. For a moment, the cabin was filled with the sound of Hagrid eating noodles. After dinner, Hermione went to the library holding her notebook. She wanted to find some information to check. The content explained in class was not difficult for her, and she could easily understand it. However, after all, it was only a first-year course that involved more complex knowledge. The teacher only touched upon it briefly and did not explain it in depth. Even if you say it, many people may not understand it. As a magic student who was very proactive in learning, Hermione certainly didn't want to leave so many questions in her mind. Fortunately, the books in the library can often provide answers to her questions. Even without that guy Qin, I can still understand these books. The girl placed a thick stack of books on the table in the reading area and murmured. There was obvious resentment in her tone, and of course, her pride and stubbornness. Just do it. Take a deep breath. Exhale slowly. Hermione calmed down her emotions, calmed herself down, and then opened one of the books she just selected. The ancient parchment is written with words full of time, as if an old and wise wizard is passing on the knowledge and wisdom he has mastered across hundreds or even thousands of years. Such an association made the girl feel inexplicably moved and awe-inspiring, and she was quickly attracted by the knowledge and completely forgot herself. Time passed little by little, night fell, and the magic wall lamp in the library gave off a soft light, bright but not dazzling. Students come and go in the library. Some sit down and read books, some take the borrowed books away, some wander aimlessly, and so on. Hermione was completely unaware of this, and was still looking through the book carefully and occasionally writing and drawing in her notebook, until an obscure piece of content made her frown, and she couldn't figure it out after thinking hard for a long time. So, she subconsciously pointed to that sentence and asked doubtfully, "Qin, why is this herb used twice here, and it's different parts of the same herb?" "Let me see. It's very simple. Because the roots and leaves of this plant have different properties, they need to be put in at different temperatures when preparing the potion. This is what SNE Professor Pooh has been emphasizing, that sequence. Sequence is one of the keys to ensure the success of potions," the familiar voice said. "Oh, so that's it, huh?" While Hermione was talking, she suddenly realized that something was wrong, because Qin, who was not here originally, had sat next to her at some point, with a book in front of her as usual, and answered the questions she just asked as usual. When did you arrive?" Hermione asked with a slight pout. "About when you turned to page 8. Qin Yu pointed at the potion-related book Hermione was reading and raised his eyebrows. "Why didn't you tell me when you came?" "I saw that you were reading a book very seriously, so I didn't bother you." "Then what did you just do?" Hermione couldn't help but ask the biggest doubt in her heart. Who would have thought that? Qin Yu pondered for a long time and said, "Well, secret." "You." Hermione's eyes suddenly widened, expressing dissatisfaction. "Okay, read the book carefully, otherwise Mrs. Pinksy will get angry again." Qin Yu did not give Hermione a chance to continue asking questions, and used the librarian teacher as a shield. This made Hermione feel suffocated. By coincidence, Mrs. Pinksy happened to be walking nearby at this time, and looked over with a somewhat unkind look. Hermione could only give up and continue to ask, lowering her head to read. However, her left foot hidden under the table kicked hard to the side. "This guy Qin is so annoying," Hermione said secretly in her heart. After Qin Yu was kicked by the girl without any pain, he shrugged and continued to read his book. Surprise, if you tell it in advance, you lose a lot of fun. Chapter 120. Qin Yu has always maintained sufficient curiosity and desire to explore the world around him, and desires to be different every day. However, in his original world, or previous life, he was trapped in work day after day. He felt that the work that he could see at the end hardly brought any sense of accomplishment. He could only be happy on the day when he paid his monthly salary. The rest is probably machinery and repetition. Therefore, he could well understand that his inner fear reflected by the magical item Boggett would be a desk with even a weekly work report on it. Now, he has come to this world full of magic, and he is pushed forward by an invisible hand of fate. Although he often feels that he cannot help himself, he feels a sense of fulfillment. He cautiously and excitedly explored this paradoxical, familiar and strange magical world, eagerly learned all kinds of knowledge, dealt with all kinds of people, and then carefully protected a little girl around him. Maybe the future is uncertain, but I never thought about stopping and doing nothing, and then leaving everything to fate. This is probably the way Qin Yu deals with things in this world, full of curiosity and cherishing those people and things that are worthy of cherishing. Therefore, in order to improve his strength, he can jump into the snake cave and fight the basilisk, or he can take off his robe and put on an apron to make a bowl of longevity noodles for the little girl. Enjoy it and enjoy it. "Qin, it's so difficult here. Why are the two descriptions different? Or even completely contradictory?" Hermione encountered something she didn't understand again and asked Qin Yu again. The girl had completely forgotten her anger just now and was immersed in the vast ocean of magic knowledge. She hated Qin, but she still chose to respect his little secrets, just like her mother would respect some of her father's privacy. Moreover, Hermione had a vague feeling that Qin would tell her what was going on sooner or later, so there was no need to worry about guessing now and add to her worries in vain. Having figured this out, After giving him a kick, Hermione gradually felt relieved and concentrated on reading and studying. Occasionally, when she got tired from reading, she would lean on someone to rest for a while. After Qin Yu saw what Hermione was confused about, he thought for a moment and said to her, "This may be an error of expression often encountered in magic books." Hermione tilted her head and asked in confusion, "Are there also mistakes in the book?" Of course, it is not uncommon for errors to appear in books. There are many reasons. It may be that the writer did not understand the correct steps for potion preparation at the beginning, or there may be errors or omissions when recording or copying, or even some people deliberately left wrong records, which caused the content in the book to be inconsistent with the actual situation. When later people discovered the truth during practice, they would make different records than before. So that's it. Then how do we know which one is right? Hermione thought of the key point again. "Of course I will practice it myself." Qin Yu said this, raised his hand and waved forward, and said solemnly, "Because practice is the only criterion for testing truth." "Oh, I understand." Hermione nodded, and then asked doubtfully, "But why did you do this when you said this? Is this some special spellcasting gesture?" When the little girl spoke, she imitated Qin Yu's example and raised her fair arm and waved it forward. "Learn decently." Well, this is to add a great man buff, which can greatly enhance the momentum of saying this. Qin Yu said seriously. Hermione sad face underscore? Hermione was obviously confused by Qin Yu. She didn't know what the phrase great man buff meant, nor how she could increase the power of her speech without using a wand. She did know that the loud voice curse could increase the volume, but this also requires a wand. When casting a spell, the tip of the wand must be pressed against the throat. Looking at Hermione's reaction, Qin Yu knew that what he said was a bit cold. It was difficult for this little Western girl to understand the meaning of his words and couldn't get the essence. Therefore, Qin Yu, cultural export, has a long way to go. So, based on the principle of, as long as I'm not embarrassed, I won't feel embarrassed, he forcibly changed the topic. This is not important. The most important thing is that you have to remember one sentence. It is better to have no book at all if you completely believe in what is in the book. This is what an Eastern philosopher named Mencius said. Well, that's a very philosophical statement. I'll remember it. After thinking about it for a while, Hermione nodded obediently, fully agreeing with what she said. So serious. What a cute and adorable primary school bully. Qin Yu smiled and rubbed her long brown hair, feeling very pleased. Hermione shrugged helplessly. There was nothing she could do about this guy. Mrs. Pants was not far away, and she couldn't protest to Qin, so she could only let him touch her head. Fortunately, Qin Yu did not do anything more. After the two discussed the issue in a low voice and briefly, before Mrs. Pinksy came over for inspection, they became quiet again and each read the books in their hands. In fact, Hermione can find contradictions in the book, which means that she has been exposed to more advanced magical knowledge. After all, those simple and basic magical knowledge is a consensus reached by countless generations, and there is basically no disagreement, just like no one would question a simple question like 1 + 1 is equal to 2. As the knowledge deepens, disputes and contradictions will inevitably arise. This is inevitable. Thinking of this, Qin Yu also felt a sense of urgency and warned himself not to slack off in his magic studies, lest he be overtaken by little Hermione one day. As a result, he devoted himself more seriously to the ocean of magic knowledge. Therefore, teaching and learning may also mean mutual supervision. It's quiet at night. Because it was closing time, Qin Yu and Hermione, who had been kicked out of the library by Mrs. Pinksy, walked around the campus. Along the way, little Hermione chattered about what she had learned today and expressed her own views on a certain issue. At the same time, she regretted that she did not have the appropriate materials at hand and could not immediately put it into practice to test which view was the right one. Correct. Qin Yu smiled and told her not to be too anxious. Laying a solid foundation is the most important thing. Advanced potions are definitely more dangerous. Without a solid foundation, the consequences will be disastrous. The magic experiment accidents that happen every year in the senior grades are the best negative teaching materials. The little girl stuck out her tongue after hearing this, feeling a little embarrassed by her impatience. At the same time, she also learned another Eastern proverb from Qin Shuo. If you are too anxious, you will not be able to eat steaming food. Qin, I'm so hungry. Upon hearing the word food, Hermione suddenly stopped in her tracks and said to Qin Yu with her mouth pursed. Then, eat this, I got it from Hagrid today. Qin Yu took out a rainbow lollipop, a specialty of Honeyduke's candy shop, from his pocket. There are colorful flowing patterns slowly flowing on the candy. Hermione knew that this kind of lollipop not only looked good, but also tasted particularly delicious, with a rich taste experience in every bite. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but swallow her saliva. But if you eat too much sweets at night, you will get cavities, she said obviously without meaning. What's the big deal? I'll teach you an oral cleaning spell later, which will ensure that your mouth is clean. Not only will you not get cavities, but it will also make your breath fresh. Qin Yu said this and put the candy together. Hermione's mouth was stuffed into the little girl's mouth with almost no obstruction. Obviously, Hermione had wanted to eat it for a long time. How could she resist the delicious food brought to her mouth? Hey, let's just say, I can eat whatever I want from now on, and I won't have to worry about damaging my teeth anymore, Hermione said happily while holding a lollipop and sucking on the candy. Yes, we are magicians, Qin Yu said casually with a smile. Many years later, every time she recalled today's innocent conversation, the grown-up Hermione was filled with embarrassment. She always felt that she had become strange. It must have been this guy Qin who was causing trouble. Otherwise, I won't try anything just because I have a spell like the oral cleansing spell. However, Qin Yu innocently said every time that he taught her this spell for the health of her teeth. How could she have such messy thoughts? This was disrespectful to magic. Just like some authors, they definitely just want to write about dental health issues. His words were naturally followed by Hermione kicking him off the bed, or some other punishment unique to the two of them. Of course, these are all things that will happen many years later and will not be mentioned here. Chapter 121. When Qin Yu, Hermione, and the two entered the Gryffindor dormitory area through the doorway behind the fat lady's portrait, they were still some time away from going to bed. Normally, Hermione would go straight back to wash up and go to bed. However, today, because Qin Yu let her go after school, she asked Qin Yu to give her extra lessons in the public rest area on the grounds that she had not completed her study tasks. After all, it's not convenient to talk in the library. I have a lot of questions that I didn't have time to ask, Hermione explained again. Okay, I have nothing to do anyway. Of course Qin Yu had no objection. It's better to spend some time with little Hermione than go back to the dormitory and hang out with those guys. Then I'll go back and get the book and I'll be back soon. After Hermione said this, she went back to get her things in a very good mood. Qin Yu also took advantage of this gap to go back to his dormitory, put down his things, and changed into more homely clothes. After doing this, he glanced at the few idle brats, shook his head and sighed with great contempt and sympathy, and then prepared to go find his little girl. Not to mention, his life in the second year of Hogwarts was much better than that in the first year. After all, Hermione was here. Thinking about this, Qin Yu took one of his usual quills and returned to the Gryffindor common rest area. Hermione also happened to come out of the girls' dormitory area at this time. The little girl was very quick and had already changed into a pair of light blue pajamas in a short time. Qin Yu was quite familiar with these pajamas. Hermione often wore them at home. Seeing Qin Yu waiting there, Hermione trotted over with a few books in her arms. Her fair little face became flushed from the exercise. This made Qin Yu want to pinch that cute face. However, there were other people in the common rest area after all, so he restrained his impulse, took the few books from Hermione's hand, and pulled her to sit in a quieter corner. Which class should I start with? Qin Yu asked after sitting down. How about History of Magic? Hermione held up the History of Magic written by Bathilda Bagshot. This is the designated textbook for the History of Magic class in first-year students at Hogwarts. Looking at the book, Qin Yu mumbled and was speechless for a moment. Hey, let's leave it until the end. After all, this class is easy to make you sleepy. Hermione stuck out her tongue and put down History of Magic. This little girl was clearly teasing Qin Yu on purpose, and she looked triumphant after the little prank succeeded. Qin Yu could only shake his head helplessly. There was nothing he could do about her, so he couldn't punish her with a spanking. This would make him seem not generous enough. Then, let's stick to potions. I still have a few questions to ask you while I'm in the library. I'll look for my notes later. Hermione took out another book, a book, and a notebook full of words. Well, I still like potions. Qin Yu studied the courses taught by his eldest brother, Professor Snape, quite seriously. So, Hermione asked Qin Yu for advice on some of the questions she had accumulated over the past 2 days. Qin Yu, on the other hand, explained everything in detail and in simple terms. Although there are some issues that lower grades should not be concerned about, in order for Hermione to understand the direction and context of learning, he will also extend more and deeper knowledge. Of course, this will inevitably squeeze the little girl's young brain and make it full. Load operation consumes a lot of energy. At this time, the rainbow lollipop prepared by Qin Yu once again played the role of driving away hunger and replenishing energy. After being stuffed with a lollipop by Qin Yu, Hermione sucked on the sugar in the candy. The happiness caused by the sweetness made her squint her eyes and enjoy it for a moment from time to time, and then re-engaged in the rapid operation of her brain. In this way, the course ended quickly. Qin Yu looked at Hermione's potions notebook and couldn't help but praise. The notes you took are very good and detailed. After receiving the compliment, Hermione said happily, "Hee hee, is that so? I thought you would find these questions of mine superficial and childish." Hearing this, Qin Yu shook his head and said solemnly, "On the contrary, there are some questions that I was not aware of when I was in class, and many of them are even questions that can avoid misunderstandings in learning. If these questions are understood one by one, I believe that even ordinary students can learn this course well." The problems Hermione encountered during the recent class were indeed things he had not expected when he took her to preview them in advance. "Really? Then wouldn't I be awesome?" Hermione said proudly, raising her little face. "Of course, don't look at who is Hermione Granger's sister." Qin Yu smiled and rubbed her head. "Hey, I'm not your sister. My surname is Granger," the little girl muttered. Of course, after she said this, she did not continue to dwell on this issue. Instead, she continued to take out another book and another notebook and said to Qin Yu, "Qin Yu's classmate is definitely not my brother. Let's talk about it next. Learn herbal medicine." "Okay." Qin Yu also laughed at Hermione's long qualifier. As he spoke, he picked up Hermione's herbal notes. Looking at the questions above, Qin Yu suddenly seemed to catch some idea in his mind. Then, he rubbed his chin. The corners of his mouth gradually raised, and a playful look appeared in his eyes. "Notes from top students, collection of wrong questions. It's really a nostalgic past." "Qin, your smile is so evil." After Hermione said this, she leaned outward, trying to stay away from this guy. "Miss Granger, you have no idea what you have brought to Hogwarts. The students of Hogwarts in the future will remember your first and last name." Qin Yu said to Hermione in a low voice that seemed full of charm. Said, "Huh." The little girl was confused by what she said. That day's look with a bit of worry is so cute. Faced with Hermione's somewhat foul cuteness, Qin Yu couldn't help but reach out and pinch her little face. "Well, there are not many people in the public rest area now, so you won't be easily discovered by others if you do something." Saying some strange words again, Hermione pouted and said helplessly, "Haha, let's not talk about it for now. Later, give me a copy of all your notes and I will sort them out." Qin Yu said happily, "Yeah, I understand. Now, can you tell me about herbalism? I really have a lot of questions to ask." Hermione urged. Generally speaking, after letting him touch his head and pinching his face, Qin should be satisfied and get down to business. This is the little girl's experience. Sure enough, Qin Yu nodded, clapped his hands, and continued the explanation he had just interrupted. Humph, he is such an easy-to-satisfy guy. While listening to his explanation, Hermione muttered something contemptuously in her mind. Chapter 122. After all, the time before going to bed is limited. By the time Qin Yu had just finished speaking on the fifth herbology-related question, the last time to go to bed had arrived. Hermione had no choice but to leave the remaining questions for tomorrow. "Good night, Qin." The little girl picked up the book and waved to Qin Yu. "Good night, Hermione," Qin Yu said, and casually helped her straighten a few hairs hanging around her mouth. Hermione shrugged, narrowed her mouth, and exhaled a long breath from the end of her nose. The little girl felt that time passed so fast, and it felt like the two of them had not been together for long. Then, she felt that time was very slow, and it would take a whole night before she could see Qin again. Although Qin once said that if the friendship between two good friends is long-lasting, then there is no need to care whether they are together every moment, day and night. Qin said that this was a sentence from an ancient Oriental poem, and he also taught her the original pronunciation. However, he was always unable to pronounce it well, and was laughed at by Qin for having a big tongue. How can you blame her? Who makes Eastern languages too difficult? It is completely different from my native English. The most difficult thing is that every word has a tone. God knows why the same pronunciation has such complicated tone changes. Qin, family, love, king, aren't they all the same? Of course, she believes that as long as she gives herself enough time, she will definitely learn this language well. The premise is that Qin, the teacher, must patiently teach him, so the responsibility still lies with Qin. Liang Qin Rua poetry has been trying for a long time. Hermione silently recited the difficult pronunciation of this poem in her mind, and felt that the poem was indeed beautiful and made sense. However, she still felt that it would be nice if they could be together all the time. Unfortunately, the accommodation rules at Hogwarts are divided into men and women. I can't secretly go to Qin at night and chat with Qin in bed all night like I can at home, although I may fall asleep in the middle. Feeling the way Hermione looked at him, the emotion conveyed in her eyes was so obvious and pure that Qin Yu could easily understand what she was thinking at this time. Okay, let's go back. Go to bed early and get up early so that you can grow stronger, Qin Yu said, rubbing her head. Okay, grow your body, that's the sentence again. Hermione felt that she should grow up quickly, so that when she grows up, she can do what she wants to do. Then, good night, Qin. The little girl said good night again. Good night, my dear princess, Qin Yu said with a smile. Hearing this title, Hermione couldn't help but curl up the corners of her mouth, and her mood became very good. In this way, the two said good night to each other twice, lingered for a while, and finally returned to the dormitory area where they lived at the right time. Just as Qin Yu and Hermione said good night to each other, and soon after they separated, the entire Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep and became quiet. After another 2 or 3/4 of an hour, a slender figure left the Slytherin rest area. Seeing this figure, readers will be able to guess right away that this is our old acquaintance, Draco Malfoy, the young master of the Malfoy family mentioned above. I saw that this young man was different from the first night outing. He was less nervous and sneaky, and his pace was much more leisurely. He walked through the corridors in a familiar way, bypassing obstacles, avoiding the sight of Argus Filch, the cat slave on night watch, and walked quickly outside the castle. Of course, although he was said to be calm, he was actually very anxious. This could be seen from the fact that he stopped from time to time and glanced around unconsciously, as if he was looking for some target, but he found nothing. And his thoughts at this time were just as he showed, anxious and messy. By the way, several days have passed since he encountered the mysterious pile of fallen leaves in the remote corridor. In the past few days, Malfoy would go to the greenhouse and vegetables at midnight every night according to the leaf message. Under the oak trees between the fields, waiting for your own magical encounter. However, things didn't happen as he expected. He didn't expect anyone at night. However, there was a squirrel that seemed to have become familiar with him, and was brave enough to snatch the acorns away from him, but it still acted a little panicked. Carefully hiding in a shadow, patiently waiting for Filch on night watch to go away, Malfoy once again looked aimlessly at the masonry walls of the castle in the night. What am I doing in the middle of the night? He suddenly felt a strange sense of unreality in his heart, as if he was dreaming at this time, and he couldn't figure out why he appeared here late at night. Yes, he was going to an appointment that might be destined to be missed by no one. He quickly gave another answer in his mind. But why would I go if I knew no one would come? Maybe out of anger? Yes, I am very angry, very angry. After I see that person, I want to ask him why he is trying to trick me. Even if the other person is 10 times or 100 times stronger than me, I still want to find out. But when he thought about the other party's strength, he was actually a little scared. He looked so weak in the face of absolute strength. Maybe there is no need to question, the other party may really have something wrong. As long as he explains the reason, I can understand it. What's more, he didn't show any malice that day and was kind enough to enlighten me. Of course, even if he doesn't show up again, I have nothing to resent. After all, he doesn't owe me anything. When Malfoy thought of this, he felt inexplicably better. Since you can't change the thing itself, then change your mood. He feels like a philosopher at this time. Well, life has made him full of philosophy. Not long after, Filch's footsteps and the light of the lantern were far away. Malfoy walked out of the shadows and continued walking outside the castle. This time he no longer looked around blankly, and his steps became firmer. If Qin Yu could know Draco Malfoy's various mental processes at this time, he would probably be deeply moved by his self-PUA. Soon, Malfoy followed his familiar route, passed the greenhouse managed by Professor Sprout, stepped onto the flat grass, and came to the foot of the tall oak tree again. The little squirrel had already collected some acorns. As soon as he saw Malfoy arriving, he hugged the largest fruit and ran away. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on Malfoy's pale and handsome face. As everyone knows, this is the first time he smiled after several days, but probably no one saw it. After sorting out his mood, he sat on the ground, leaning against the trunk of the big oak tree, quietly waiting for the person who might not appear. The night is like water, and the moonlight shines through the leaves, dim and cold, just like the young man's mood at this time. Chapter 123. In the principal's office and living room, an old man with a white beard, wearing a silver-gray silk pajamas and a flat-topped tassel hat, turned around from the window he originally faced. As he walked slowly towards a round-backed chair in the room, he muttered, "I finally don't have to help him avoid Filch today. I have to say that the saying practice makes perfect really applies to this kid." There was a hint of light ridicule in his tone, as if he had seen something interesting. Of course, this old man is none other than the talker of Hogwarts, the principal, His Excellency Albus Dumbledore. As the principal of a great magic school and a recognized powerhouse in the wizarding world, although Dumbledore does not know everything in the school, it is still very easy if he deliberately observes someone. Just last Thursday night, he had a less formal but necessary conversation with Qin Yu. After that, Dumbledore occasionally used some magical means to observe Qin's behavior. Of course, this kind of observation does not involve too much privacy. He is just watching from a distance. Therefore, Dumbledore did not see too much of the interaction between the child Qin and the little girl Hermione. After all, the elderly are prone to diabetes, dense fog. Coming back to serious matters, when Qin Yu communicated with Draco Malfoy while hiding his body, Dumbledore actually saw it clearly from the sidelines. There is no way. Qin's magic fluctuates a lot when he casts the spell, and he cannot hide it from the world's top wizard. So, he rushed over, used the same invisibility magic, and hid aside, witnessing how Qin deceived. No, it was to enlighten, encourage, and spur Draco. At that time, Dumbledore watched with relish how Draco Malfoy, under the verbal mobilization of the pile of leaves, went from depression to emotional collapse to rekindling hope. If the word is inappropriate, cross it out. It is amazing to see. As a senior education practitioner, Dumbledore knew the importance of teaching students in accordance with their aptitude. Therefore, he did not object to Qin using less than above-board means to help Draco. After all, compared to the people in this world, cruel, Qin's performance can be described as warm and affectionate and incomparably kind. Then, he planned to see how Qin would teach Draco the child at midnight. Unexpectedly, I spent some effort to get Filch on night watch to avoid Draco, allowing the latter to reach his destination smoothly, and waited with the child all night, but did not wait for Qin to show up. In fact, not long after midnight, Lao Deng had a premonition that Qin might not show up. He was just taking a chance and felt that Qin, a kid so young, probably wouldn't be able to do this kind of trick that only an old fox like him could do. However, it wasn't until the sky cleared and the dew wet his white beard, and he looked at Draco with a disappointed look on his face, that he had to admit that Qin had indeed used such a trick. "I really underestimated this child Qin," Dumbledore said with emotion while standing not far from the oak tree. It's not that he underestimated Qin's magical attainments. On the contrary, he quite recognized Qin's talent and hard work in magic, and regarded Qin as one of the few magic geniuses he had seen in his life. What he underestimated was the child's character. Dumbledore did not expect Qin to be so patient at such a young age, and to have such a deep understanding of the impetuousness and hardships of human nature. Using the phrase sophisticated to describe this child may be an exaggeration, but it is definitely not an exaggeration. Yes, Draco Malfoy's character is impetuous. Even if Dumbledore looked at him from a distance, he could feel the child's inner restlessness and restlessness. This is probably the main reason why Qin didn't go to the date. In other words, Qin set up this midnight date because he saw through Draco's character. That morning, although Dumbledore stood and waited with Draco all night long, honing his mind all night long, on the way back to the castle, a smile could not help but gradually appear on his face. On the old face, he was delighted to see Qin's means. From such means, he saw the child's reliability and the hope for the future. Of course, it may be too early to say this now. He does not want to impose his so-called hope on anyone arbitrarily. This is unfair to anyone. However, this does not prevent Dumbledore from improving his evaluation of Qin a lot again. Therefore, in the next few days, after Dumbledore has completed the necessary work, he will take some time to pay attention to the movements of Qin Yu and Draco Malfoy. The latter was still obsessed with midnight dates and would sneak out every night after curfew. Thanks to the secret help of Dumbledore, the principal, Draco narrowly escaped being discovered several times and successfully arrived. We found the agreed place, under the oak tree, and waited all night. And what is the former, the instigator Qin Yu, doing? He is studying, eating, resting, and playing as usual, and studying, eating, resting, and playing with the little girl Hermione, And according to Hagrid, he is also studying a kind of birthday noodles with Hagrid, and it can be easily found from the student information that Loudang knows that the person who recently celebrated his birthday is little Hermione. So, while Dumbledore and Draco were waiting hard for Qin Yu to show up, Qin Yu was trying his best to make the little girl happy. Dumbledore wanted to say to him, "You should do something serious, Barbatican." Well, it just means something like that. Author. I cook everything, it's my fault. However, Dumbledore is not entirely complaining about Qin. Judging from Draco's recent reaction, the child has gradually found some inner peace from anxiety, doubt, confusion, and many other complicated emotions, and has changed a lot. At least, I'm getting better and better at avoiding Filch's inspections. Dumbledore couldn't help but joke. This can be considered one of Draco's recent improvements. After sitting on the round-back chair for a while and sorting out some thoughts, Dumbledore planned to go to bed. He was already very tired after staying up with Draco for a few nights. However, just when he stood up, through the window facing the inner courtyard of the school, he saw another figure walking in the corridor. This figure was taller than Draco, but he could still tell that he was a minor. And judging from the direction in which this boy came, he should be coming from Gryffindor Tower. So, who is this person? If you really mean Merlin, Merlin will be here. A smile appeared on Dumbledore's eyebrows, and his sleepiness disappeared for a moment. As an elderly person, you don't get enough sleep. Why don't you go see if anything interesting happens tonight? After saying goodbye to Hermione, Qin Yu returned to the dormitory. As usual, he would meditate for a while before falling asleep. However, not long after he entered trance using the meditation method taught by Professor Swinton, he suddenly felt like a whim and sneezed twice in succession. I thought at one time and cursed at the other. So someone is scolding me? Qin Yu came to the conclusion of a very magical world. After a brief thought, he probably doesn't have many enemies. Who is scolding him? After going through the names in his mind one by one, Qin Yu selected Draco Malfoy and ranked him at the front. Because, recently, this boy is probably the one who resents himself the most. First, as Qin Yu himself, I oppressed this boy too deeply. Secondly, the waistcoat I was wearing had given this guy some slack for several days, so it was inevitable that he would be scolded. This can be regarded as the superposition of double resentments. In fact, Qin Yu didn't forget to go to the midnight appointment, but he had been waiting for the news that Malfoy had been caught. In his opinion, sneaking out of the castle and going to the greenhouse at midnight was definitely not an easy task. It was normal for Malfoy to be caught after several days. Let this kid experience 50 points from Slytherin. It must be a rare experience. By then, if Malfoy can have a certain calm attitude towards the situation, then the situation should be almost the same. However, Qin Yu waited and waited for several days, but there was no news that this kid had been arrested. Today he sneezed twice again, and he was wondering if he should go and see what happened. Judging from the feedback from Hermione, Harry, and Ron, Qin Yu felt that Malfoy had most likely been under the oak tree in the past few days. Qin Yu's conscience was still a little uneasy after leaving this kid alone for so many days. Of course, this kind of uneasiness was not much. So, around midnight, he came out of the Gryffindor rest area, sneaked out of the castle, and headed towards the greenhouse. After passing the familiar greenhouse and stepping on the soft lawn, Qin Yu felt that the surroundings were really quiet, and he couldn't help but murmur in his heart, "Isn't this kid not here? He really failed to live up to my high expectations." He murmured with some hatred. As soon as he finished speaking, he vaguely heard the sound of branches being trampled. However, if he listened carefully, he couldn't tell where it came from. There was only the faint sound of wild beasts coming from the forbidden forest in the distance. The roar broke the midnight silence. It was probably an illusion. Qin Yu shrugged and continued walking forward. Then, soon, he saw the trunk of the big oak tree and the boy with blonde hair sitting under the trunk. The boy sat quietly under the tree, his pale face illuminated by the moonlight, making it pale with a hint of darkness. Qin Yu really wanted to say that this guy is suitable for filming ghost movies. However, obviously now is not the time to complain. The boy was none other than Draco Malfoy, who Qin Yu had asked to meet here at midnight. Malfoy had obviously kept his promise, even several times. However, Qin Yu came over today, but still had no intention of showing up. He just looked at it quietly for a while, then turned and left. If jade is not polished, it will become useless. He muttered this sentence with an inexplicable tone, and he didn't know whether he was satisfied or dissatisfied. In short, his figure quickly disappeared into the ancient buildings of the castle. Chapter 124. Although the boy under the oak tree behaved calmly, Qin Yu still did not choose to show up at this time. In addition to wanting Draco Malfoy to stay up for a few more days to consolidate the effect, he actually had no idea how to teach this kid. After all, it was just because he wanted to cheer up the naughty boy's low energy that day, and because of Dumbledore's previous entrustment, he had an impromptu idea and concealed his traces to hold a mysterious leaf exchange. Qin Yu really didn't think too carefully about how to operate in the future. When he was idle these days, he was slowly thinking about what methods to use. Well, Dumbledore completely mistook Qin Yu's slow reaction for being patient and cunning. However, after Hermione's inspiration, Qin Yu already had a pretty good entry point. Once he made some preparations, it would be almost done. Of course, for him, training Draco Malfoy was just an episode in his study and life at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Whether it would succeed or not, he couldn't say. However, it is better than letting this naughty kid look back many years later and feel regret for wasting his years and feel shame for doing nothing. Well, it's time for Draco Malfoy, this Davari, to learn his skills and make more contributions to the magnificent cause of the wizarding world. Thinking of these far-fetched thoughts, Qin Yu returned to Gryffindor Tower along the original route and successfully returned to his dormitory. What Qin Yu didn't know was that not long after his figure left the corridor of the conservatory, Dumbledore, wearing silver-gray silk pajamas and a flat, tasseled soft hat, appeared near the bushes next to the grass. Figure. Just now, when Qin Yu said those words about hating iron, Dumbledore was so distracted that he accidentally stepped on a dead branch on the ground. It was clearly Qin who had let little Malfoy go for several days, but now he said such words. Dumbledore did not expect it. It was as if there were countless manic dragons running in his heart, so he was temporarily distracted. I didn't notice there was something under my feet. Of course, this is also related to the fact that he is not too cautious in the first place. After all, he is in his own territory, and he is still observing the students he likes, so why should he be too cautious? Fortunately, after trampling on the branches, Lao Deng relied on his rich coping experience to react in time and conceal his whereabouts even more thoroughly. Therefore, Qin Yu did not discover that there was a third person present. However, Dumbledore's hiding state did not last long, because Qin turned around and left within a minute of his arrival. This speed was so fast that Dumbledore couldn't react. As for what Qin said in Chinese, if jade is not polished, it will become useless. Dumbledore can still understand it with his rich knowledge. Moreover, he also deeply believed it. It seems that Qin has his own considerations. Since you're gone, I, an old man, should go back and catch up on some sleep, Dumbledore muttered, waved in the direction of the oak tree, and said softly, "Good night, Draco." Then, like someone else, he walked into the castle without looking back. A man and a squirrel were left alone under the oak tree, waiting for something with different purposes. Shortly after midnight entered Hogwarts, the ancient magic school in the Scottish Highlands, on the other side of the earth, 8 time zones away in a city called Salem, where the sun had not yet set. Salem, a seaside city located in Massachusetts, New England, North America, is only 24 kilometers away from Boston and not far from New York City. This city has a very ancient history. It was once one of the oldest ports established by European settlers in the New World. Another famous event that is difficult to separate from it is the Salem witch trials. One day 400 years ago, in a small town called Salem, 20 sinners who were considered evil wizards were brutally executed. In fact, not all of them were wizards. This incident had a huge shock to the entire magical world. It directly caused the magical families in the European magical world to shrink their exploration of the New World in America. It also caused hundreds of years of tension between wizards and no-mages in North America. Of course, this incident is not the only one. After that, more frictions and conflicts occurred, and tragedies never ceased. Note: no-mage is the name used by wizards in North America for ordinary people. Therefore, Salem is an unavoidable place for the wizarding world in North America. Even the seat of the Magical Congress of North America, the highest authority in the wizarding world in North America, has a tall monument erected to commemorate those who were killed in the Salem witch trials. The initiators of the Salem witch trials were the Puritans and Pursers, the mortal enemies of the witches. Compared to the hostility of the Puritans due to their fanatical beliefs, the Pursers were particularly hateful. They were really in order to eliminate the wizards. They even harmed innocent people. Of course, at present, the power of the North American magical world is strong enough, and the purifiers have long been submerged in the smoke of history. What is even more disappointing is that this city, which was originally famous for the trial of wizards, has now become a place where a large number of wizards gather, including some secret fanatical wizard groups. They use this place as a place of shame for wizards, gathering and spreading hatred towards no-mages, expressing the incompatible attitude of wizards and no-mages. This is also a headache for the Aurors of the Magical Congress of North America. From time to time, they have to deal with incidents in Salem where wizards violate the statute of secrecy and even harm no-mages. Just recently, a wizard used a frightening spell to scare a female no-mage crazy. This caused a very bad effect. The Ministry of Magic dispatched 3 Aurors to deal with it. Just the no-mage who needed to erase her memory. The chicken involved no less than 100 people. Note: Aurors, law enforcement wizards of magical law enforcement agencies. The wizard involved was also imprisoned in the Magic Congress prison and will face an extremely severe trial. The Aurors of the Magical Congress are just a bunch of lackeys who bully the weak and fear the strong. Together with the Magical Congress, they abuse the rights given to them by all of us wizards. In an old wooden house, a thin, middle-aged man with a beard waved his fist and said angrily, "That's right. It has only been so long, but they have forgotten the harm caused by no-mage to wizards and the hatred of their ancestors." Another female wizard with freckles on her face also echoed angrily, "Yes, they forgot. Yes, these lackeys. Magical Congress just drags out the answer. A bunch of guys who have forgotten their roots." Everyone shouted at once, expressing their strong dissatisfaction, because the unlucky wizard who was captured was once a member of their small group, and they believed that the punishment he would face would far exceed his own behavior. After all, that no-mage who was driven crazy was really hateful. He was ridiculing the unlucky wizard all day long, and even said, "A person with an ugly appearance and suspicious behavior like you would have been regarded as a wizard 400 years ago. Burned to death. Look, what a vicious human being this is," perfectly fitting their stereotype of a no-mage. However, after just a small punishment for such a vicious no-mage, the unlucky wizard was mercilessly arrested by the Auror. This is simply ridiculous. It's ironic. It's an unacceptable humiliation. The thin, middle-aged wizard with a beard shouted angrily again. Everyone responded fiercely again. Everyone was talking about how to denounce the misbehavior of the Magic Congress and try to rescue their poor companion. However, they never discussed the reason. After all, there are only less than 30 people in their group, and only a dozen can gather here today. However, the strength of the Magic Congress is so powerful. Thinking of this, everyone's mood couldn't help but feel a little low, and anger and humiliation enveloped the entire room. At this moment, there was a creak and the wooden door was pushed open. The room immediately fell silent. The dozen or so wizards of different ages present all turned their attention to the door. They knew that this wooden house was cast with a special spell, especially the wooden door. During their party, even wizards, let alone no-mages, would find it difficult to open it easily. However, just as they were discussing the incident enthusiastically, the wooden door was gently pushed open. This had to make them care about who the visitor was. I saw that this man was a tall man in his 30s with handsome features. He was wearing a black suit and a wide-brimmed hat of the same color, with a vague smile on his face. "Excuse me, who are you?" the thin, bearded man asked with a frown. At the same time, he slowly pulled out the wand from his inner pocket, with a vigilant look on his face. "Oh, let me introduce myself. My name is Ian Stanley. You can call me Ian." The visitor took off his hat and said with a slow smile, "What are you doing here? Our party does not accept temporary participants. If you want to participate, you can make an appointment with me in advance, and I will review your qualifications." The bearded man said slightly nervously, "What am I here to do? Let me think about it." Ian said this, really showing his thoughts. As he spoke, he walked slowly and hung the hat in his hand on the coat rack by the door. He behaved casually and calmly, as if he had returned to his own home. He doesn't even know what he is doing here. Is he a fool? Or is he a madman? Such thoughts came to everyone's mind. Just when everyone was confused and guessing, the guy named Ian slapped his forehead and said with a sneer, "I remembered. I'm here to clean up you bunch of trash." After saying this, he revealed 2 rows of white teeth, and his smile was cold and evil, and his left hand was already holding a dark wand. Bang! Bang! Suddenly the sound of tables and chairs colliding was heard in the room, and everyone stood up in a hurry and took out their wands. They instinctively felt that this guy who looked like both a fool and a madman must be very difficult to deal with, and they must not take it lightly. "Ouch! It's such a big battle. It really scares me." Ian said he was scared, but his expression was filled with excitement, as if he was attending a pleasant dance. Dimensional Wall. To explain, this book has not been renamed, but 5 new titles and covers have been added. The original titles are still there. This is the multi-title test function of the platform. According to the platform, old readers should not be able to read it. As for the new book title, I don't know why everyone even saw the new cover. The author doesn't know the reason very well. Maybe it's a bug. Let me add that Nomage is the name for ordinary people in North America, which means the same thing as Muggle, just like potatoes are also called potatoes or yam eggs. Chapter 125. The intruder Ian Stanley and the wizards in the wooden house waved their wands. The battle starts instantly in this small room. The battle between wizards is definitely different from the fight between Muggles and Nomages. The personal force value of Muggles/Nomages mainly depends on their own physical fitness. The upper limit is difficult to break through, and it is difficult to create a large force gap between them. Masters of the level of fighting 10 at a time are rare, and even more so not to mention the stronger ones. On the contrary, wizards are different. With the blessing of extraordinary power, their upper limit can be said to be infinitely raised. Even wizards like Dumbledore, who are recognized as the top wizards in the wizarding world, dare not say that they have reached it. The ceiling of magical power. Of course, there are also people like Voldemort who are trying to break through the shackles from a taboo perspective and go one step further. Therefore, the difference in strength between wizards may really be that one is in heaven and one is on earth. One is an academic master who can pass Tsinghua University and Peking University, and the other is a scumbag who is still in the 3rd grade of elementary school and only gets 40 points in mathematics. As Ian Stanley, who once lived in the same body as Stephen Swinton, he fully possesses all the knowledge of Professor Stephen Swinton, masters all the magic he masters, and even some of the magic spells performed by Professor Swinton. Ian Stanley can easily perform black magic that he is unwilling to perform without any psychological burden. Therefore, in a sense, Ian Stanley, who has a crazy and cruel personality, is more terrifying than Stephen Swinton, the former Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, because he really knows how to do it. Dead hand. Of course, killing someone does not mean actually killing them. Facing a dozen wizards who were not very strong in fighting will and had varying levels of magical attainments, Ian Stanley directly cast the fire spell, forcing most of them against the wall of the wooden house. Immediately afterwards, he quickly waved his wand and cast a confinement spell, followed by a fainting spell, knocking down the most powerful bearded man in this small group with ease. The other party only had time to cast half of the Expelliarmus curse before he was knocked down. He fell to the ground with a sound. After the leader, bearded, fainted and fell to the ground, the other wizards basically had little resistance. Ian Stanley was just strolling in the wooden house, casting spells one by one, torturing more than a dozen wizards into bursts of screams. Confringo! He chanted the exploding spell, waved his wand, and a chair flying towards him exploded into pieces in the air. Several unlucky wizards were injured by the exploding wooden thorns and fell to the ground whining and lost. Attack ability. In this regard, it only took Ian less than 2 minutes to successfully bring down all the wizard members of this small group present. They are indeed a bunch of trash. He stroked the wand, which was only slightly warm, but he still felt a little unfinished. It would be better if I could have a magic sword. It would definitely be fun to fight. Ian muttered slowly. Then, he remembered the young man who was excited about getting a fully functional long sword, and also recalled the scene where the 3 long swords crossed together made a resonant sound. See chapter 61 of this book. I really missed that time when No, that's not me. That's Stephen Swinton, not Ian Stanley. Even if he goes through all that guy's experiences, he is still not him. And among the 3 swords, the one that belonged to Stephen Swinton had long been thrown away by him in the mysterious pyramid in Egypt, and it was locked up with the guy and the mummy in the dark ancient tomb. Apart from this body, Ian didn't want anything related to Stephen. Even the wand was replaced with a new one, so naturally the sword couldn't stay with him. Foreign objects are easily discarded, but those memories appear in my mind from time to time. Just now, I even started to miss the time I spent with that Oriental boy. How ridiculous. How could I miss that kid who liked to show off, be glib and flashy? Thinking of this, Ian Stanley's original pleasure from beating people disappeared, and his original calmness turned into impatience. He kicked the beard awake, then looked around and said coldly, "Remember, gather here at 8 o'clock this Saturday night. If anyone fails to come, you will face more than today's punishment," Ian said, using his wand to cast a spell on the ground and write an address in Salem. Then, Without waiting for anyone to respond, he waved his wand again, blasting a big hole in the door, and left without looking back. Compared to the polite way he walked in when he showed up, his behavior when he left could be said to be extremely rude. Of course, compared to the pain caused by the various spells he just cast on everyone, it is obviously not surprising to blow up a door. Who is he? The freckled witch stood up with difficulty, holding her stomach and wiping the blood from the corner of her mouth. She really felt that the attack she suffered was sudden and inexplicable. If they were from the Magic Congress, they would at least accuse them of secretly slandering the Magic Congress. Or, if he is an enemy, he should also explain why he came and what he wants. And this man named Ian Stanley said that he wanted to clean up you bunch of rubbish and then started fighting. It was something that even Merlin would be speechless. I don't know. I've never heard of this name. The bearded man rubbed his head, thought for a while, and then continued, however. I vaguely heard from my friends in Brazil that there is a group claiming to be GA recently. The forces are gathering strength in secret. Maybe this person is theirs. GA? What kind of organization is this? Someone asked in confusion. It's Grindelwald's army. Beard said the full name of the organization. Suddenly hearing the name Grindelwald from the mouth of their leader, everyone couldn't help but fell into a state of astonishment. Obviously, the name Grindelwald is not unfamiliar to them, because this man once made a lot of noise in the wizarding world of North America. Although he is now imprisoned in the Nurmengard prison in Europe, it is still famous here in North America. Isn't Grindelwald imprisoned? The freckled witch asked this question. Everyone also looked at the bearded man at the same time, because they also wanted to know how a man who was obviously in prison came out to organize a Grindelwald army. Did he escape from prison? Someone couldn't help but guess. Many people gasped. Grindelwald was a nightmare that once hung over wizards all over the world. If he really came out, who knows what kind of turmoil it would cause. If he comes out, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The rotten Magic Congress needs to be rectified, a quiet young man suddenly said in a cold tone. After his reminder, everyone remembered the slogan Grindelwald once shouted, for the greater good. Isn't the greater benefit that Grindelwald said exactly what we want? The young man's cold tone gradually became slightly fanatical. Ahem, Roman, you are still too young. Beard coughed. The kick he had just received from Ian Stanley had obviously caused some damage to his lungs. He calmed down the pain in his lungs and continued, Grindelwald's ideas are too radical, and he is too indifferent to the lives of others. In order to achieve what he calls the great interests of wizards, he will not hesitate to sacrifice his life. In the life of many wizards, he is not a kind-hearted person. Ahem, necessary sacrifices are inevitable. The young man couldn't help but refute the elder and leader he once respected so much. Roman, the bearded man said sharply, his eyes full of anger. Sorry, don't get excited. The young man didn't want to make him too angry after all. Okay, let me continue. The bearded man looked at everyone and continued. Actually, according to my friend, this Grindelwald army that originated in the Brazilian jungle was not led by Grindelwald, because it has never been led by Grindelwald. Information from official channels confirmed that Grindelwald is still imprisoned in Nurmengard prison. This has been personally verified by Dumbledore. Moreover, the prison is extremely strictly sealed, and it is impossible for Grindelwald to remotely command this beast. The army named after him. Then who are they? Someone asked. I don't know. Maybe they just want to take advantage of Grindelwald's fame. The beard said uncertainly. What is the purpose of Ian Stanley? The freckled witch asked softly after sitting down holding her beard. If I guess correctly, he is here to recruit us, or to force us to join his organization. Bearded Beard gave his guess. After everyone heard this, they all fell into a long silence. There was no way. They were originally a loose small group, and all they could do was scold the Magic Congress and occasionally launch some protests, but they didn't have too many radical activities. Now that they were suddenly conquered by a powerful man, who might ask them to join an organization of unknown origin, they really couldn't accept it for a while. However, some of them feel that this may be a good opportunity, an opportunity to realize their ideas. Among them, of course, was the young man named Roman. Of course, everyone's reaction was noticed by the bearded man. He didn't give any clues, and finally said, There is no use in guessing now. We will find out on Saturday. Let's go back. So, everyone left with their own thoughts, looking forward to or fearing the arrival of that day. However, the waiting process is destined to be painful. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.